Chapter 1133. Zhouwen was dumbfounded, unsure of what was going on. He had never been confessed to in his life, much less by a dimensional creature, much less a calamity-grade dimensional creature. Although the woman did look beautiful and had a strange charm that humans didn't have, Zhouwen was a rather traditional human. He still couldn't accept a love that transcended species. "We don't seem to be creatures of the same species, right?" Zhouwen said carefully, not daring to reject her too directly. He was afraid that he would anger this terrifying calamity-grade existence. If she were to fly into a rage out of humiliation and unleash her calamity-grade strength, even if Zhouwen could teleport away, a large area would probably be affected by the calamity. "Are you going to marry me or not?" However, the woman was much more straightforward than Zhouwen. She pulled out the saber from her bosom and pointed it at Zhouwen. It was as though she would behead him if he said no. Zhouwen hated being threatened the most, so he immediately teleported again. At most, he would use the sky-stealing sun-shifting art to escape to another planet and return after the woman left Earth. In the past, Zhouwen hadn't advanced to the mythical stage, so his physique wasn't enough to survive in the universe. Now, with his mythical body, as long as he didn't encounter terrifying energy explosions or radiation, surviving for a period of time wasn't a problem. After teleporting out, Zhouwen's expression suddenly changed. He realized that he had teleported in front of the woman and hadn't teleported to where he wanted to go. With the augmentation of the clown mask, Zhouwen saw the surrounding space become extremely strange. The sea and sky formed a line, intersecting and distorting at the moon's position, turning the nearby area into an independent space similar to the Mobius strip. This space was connected from head to tail, completely cut off from the outside world. No matter how Zhouwen teleported through space, he was still in this space, unable to leave. Only then did Zhouwen realize that this calamity-grade woman was far more terrifying than he had imagined. "Are you going to marry me or not?" the woman asked expressionlessly, still pointing her saber at Zhouwen. "Ahem, why do you want me to marry you?" Zhouwen felt that one shouldn't have a bad temper. It was best to have a good discussion. The woman didn't answer Zhouwen's question. She continued pointing the knife at him and staring straight at him. Clearly, she only wanted an answer and not a question. Seeing that the woman didn't attack directly, Zhouwen continued, "Legend has it that the bride on Bride Island married 3 brothers, but the brothers later died. Don't tell me you're the legendary bride?" The woman finally opened her mouth to speak. "How could the place where I live be a place where mortals can live?" Although the woman didn't say whether she was the bride or not, she admitted that the legend did exist. The death of the 3 brothers was also related to her. "I'm also a mortal. Don't tell me you want to marry me and then kill me?" Zhouwen asked again. "I won't," the woman replied firmly. "Why?" Zhouwen pressed. "Are you going to marry or not?" The woman clearly didn't want to answer the question as she forced Zhouwen to give an answer again. "Since you want to marry a human, you should at least follow the rules of humans, right?" Zhouwen wanted to stall for time and see if he could find a way to escape. "We can immediately get married now." The woman clearly knew some human rules, but the rules she knew seemed to be from ancient times. "What you said are the rules of humans in the past. It's no longer the same now." As Zhouwen spoke, he attempted to use the sky-stealing sun-shifting art to escape, but it was useless. The stars in the pocket universe were all dim. In this strange space, it was clearly impossible to use interstellar teleportation. "Oh, what's the rule now?" the woman asked with a frown. "The rule now is free love. If you want to get married, you have to fall in love with the other party first," Zhouwen said as he stalled for time. The woman seemed to understand Zhouwen's words as she sheathed her knife. Zhouwen secretly heaved a sigh of relief, believing that he had finally convinced the woman. As long as he found an excuse, he might be able to escape her. However, to his surprise, after the woman sheathed her knife, she walked towards Zhouwen and began undressing. "What are you doing?" Zhou was alarmed. Isn't the so-called love of humans just lust? You said that you can only get married if you fall in love with the other party. I can do it now, the woman said as she continued walking towards Zhou. Stop, who did you hear that from? It's not like that at all, Zhou shouted as he retreated. What is it? The woman stopped and asked Zhou. It's. Zhou thought for a moment, but he couldn't explain it. All he could do was casually say what he could think of. It's that two people have to understand each other and see if their personalities and thoughts are compatible. Humans are still as hypocritical as ever, the woman said with a frown. After a pause, she continued, Then let's get to know each other. After we get to know each other, we'll get married. How do you want to get to know each other? Zhou looked at the woman in a daze, momentarily at a loss for words. Understand? Understand my ass. Zhou had no intention of dating a dimensional creature. Ignoring a dimensional creature, even if a living person stood in front of Zhou, he wouldn't know how to date, much less a terrifying calamity-grade creature. Well, why don't we go watch a movie first? Zhou recalled Li Xian's previous words. If he found dating girls boring, he could take them to the movies. They would have at least an hour and a half to relax or take a nap. Zhou felt that this was a good idea. Perhaps he could take advantage of this time to think of a way to escape from the woman's clutches. What's a movie? The woman asked with a frown. Zhou roughly explained what a movie was and the woman nodded. All right, let's go watch a movie. Going to the movies is a very beautiful thing. If there's blood everywhere, it will affect the mood. Shouldn't we restrain ourselves a little? Zhou was already beginning to regret bringing a calamity creature to a human city to watch a movie. Zhou felt that this idea was too stupid. He didn't know what was wrong with him to come up with such a stupid idea. It's inauspicious to die in marriage. I understand, the woman said calmly. I still don't know your name? Zhou asked after some thought. You, the woman answered. Chapter 1134. Upon hearing this name, Zhou was slightly alarmed as he couldn't help but size up the woman carefully. Previously, when he was learning about the ghost parade, Zhou had also learned about some of the overseas myth. Although it wasn't very detailed, Zhou still knew about a famous mythical figure like Tsukuyomi. Tsukuyomi was one of the three gods of a certain overseas pantheon. Legend had it that she was one of the three children of the god of creation. She was a twin goddess with one of the other three gods, Amaterasu. However, in other myths and legends, it was also said that Tsukuyomi was male. There were also some legends that treated Tsukuyomi and Kagaya, who was famous for her beauty, as the same person. None of this was important. What was important was that if this woman was really the legendary Tsukuyomi, her status was second only to the god of creation. Myths might be exaggerated, but to have such a status in a pantheon, no matter how exaggerated, her true strength was definitely terrifying. Watching a movie with the daughter of the god of creation? Zhou felt that this matter wasn't reliable. Fang Mingsu and company waited on Fangzhong Island for a few days, but they didn't see Zhou return. The ghost parade that would appear every night had also decreased significantly. Furthermore, the famous ghosts didn't appear again. The ones that appeared were ghosts whose names couldn't be identified. The strongest were at the mythical stage. After the three of them investigated and confirmed that Zhou was human sovereign, they imagined that the calamity creature had been killed by Zhou. I never expected him to really be human sovereign. Furthermore, he's so young. Ji Maching still found it unbelievable that Zhou was human sovereign. Fang Mingsu brought Ji Maching back inland and secretly investigated Zhou's identity. He realized that human sovereign's appearance was very similar to Zhou from the family's camp. However, Zhou had been in Luoyang for the past few days and hadn't left. It shouldn't be him. After Shiraishi Satomi returned, she told Sei Gasakai that Zhou was human sovereign, making Sei Gasakai extremely excited. No wonder. He's human sovereign to begin with. It's no wonder. I should have thought of it long ago. Apart from him, which human can slash out such a strike? By the way, you can keep this matter to yourself. Don't spread it. Watching a movie was considered a luxury for humans nowadays. With dimensional creatures breaking through the restrictions on a large scale, there were very few cities that humans could defend. Most humans retreated to dimensional zones and used the dimensional zone's repulsion towards other dimensional zone creatures to barely preserve their lives. All kinds of modern instruments and tools were severely damaged, and because the roads were cut off, raw materials could not be replenished. Even if the factory was not destroyed, the possibility of continuing production was not high. In such an environment, apart from the Federation occasionally shooting some promotional videos, it was very rare for an individual to shoot a movie. There was more and more research on using companion beasts to replace high-tech equipment. Most human gathering areas had already popularized companion beast power generation systems. However, human hobbies sometimes had nothing to do with practicality. The famous overseas devil, Sasser, was a loyal movie lover. Furthermore, he was someone who had to go to the cinema to watch movies. However, in this era, it was too difficult to find a cinema. There wasn't even a single one overseas. Therefore, every time Sasser was addicted to movies, he would secretly enter the mainland. Although Sasser's name wasn't as famous as Jing Daoxian's, those who knew him were in no way less afraid of him than Jing Daoxian. Although Jing Daoxian was infamous, few people had actually seen him kill someone. Apart from the crazy massacre in the Federation building, many of the ferocious legends about Jing Daoxian were actually just bystanders using his reputation. However, Sasser was different. Sasser wasn't famous, but the number of people he had killed far exceeded Jing Daoxian. Furthermore, he didn't leave anyone alive, so very few people knew about him. After putting on a decent suit, a white shirt and a bow tie, Sasser, whose white hair was neatly combed, arrived at the cinema's entrance. He queued up to buy a ticket and ordered a Coke and popcorn. Then, as though he was on a pilgrimage, he walked into the cinema's theater. These habits stemmed from Sasser's childhood. Back then, when his parents took him to the movies, they would always dress him up prettily. Then, they would buy Coke and popcorn and watch a movie with the family of 3. Therefore, Sasser still retained this habit even now. Sasser found his seat and sat down. He sat up straight and sized up the movie screen. Just as he had imagined, this seat was indeed a prime viewing spot. Thankfully, it hadn't been bought by anyone. Otherwise, he would have to spend more time thinking of a way to adjust his seat. It was a rather good cinema. The fragrant and steaming popcorn, iced Coke, and the prime viewing spot made Sasser in a good mood. He tidied his bow tie and waited for the movie to begin. Suddenly, a young man and woman walked in. The seats they chose happened to be in the row in front of Sasser, making him frown slightly. He recalled an unpleasant experience he had had when watching a movie. A young couple had sat in front of him, whispering to each other from time to time and kissing in front of him. It had greatly affected his viewing experience. Therefore, after the movie ended, Sasser sewed the couple's mouths together and hung them at the entrance of the cinema. Why did he have to wait until the movie ended? Movie time was sacred, so how could he kill someone while the movie was playing? Thankfully, the young man and woman who had just entered were very silent. They didn't communicate with each other, making Sasser feel much better. From the looks of it, I should have a perfect viewing experience today. Sasser sat up straight and waited for the movie to begin. Although this movie was an old one and Sasser had watched it a few times, he liked it. He wouldn't get sick of watching it a few more times. After a while, Sasser suddenly heard the young man in front of him speak. "Do you want something to eat or drink?" Sasser was immediately annoyed when he heard that. He thought to himself, what's wrong with young people these days? They don't know the essence of watching a movie at all. Iced Coke and popcorn have to be bought before entering. How can they buy them after arriving? Anything, the woman said coldly. Wait for me here. Don't move. I'll be back soon. As the young man spoke, he left, leaving the young woman sitting in front of him. The young woman was very quiet and didn't move. This made Sasser admire her very much. He still remembered that 2 months ago, when he went to watch a movie, a young woman was eating melon seeds while watching the movie. She kept squirming around. Therefore, after the movie ended, Sasser shattered all the woman's teeth and stuffed them into her stomach before hanging her at the entrance of the cinema. Orange juice and melon seeds. Try them. The man returned with 2 large cups of orange juice and a large bag of melon seed. You have to drink Coke and eat popcorn when watching a movie. Do you understand? Sasser wished he could snatch the melon seeds and orange juice and throw them at the young man's face. However, years of experience in watching movies made Sasser endure it. However, he was already thinking about how to teach the young man some movie etiquette after the movie ended. Chapter 11:35. Speaking of which, Jowen felt wronged. If you asked him how to kill dimensional creatures or which dimensional zone had any taboos, he might really know. However, Jowen really didn't know what taboos there were in a movie theater. His knowledge of movie theaters basically came from Li Xian's words, so how could he know so much? Li Xian only cared about flaunting and bragging. How could he talk about such things? He only talked about how he was popular with girls and how girls would throw themselves at him. After distributing the melon seeds and orange juice to Tsukuyumi, Jowen didn't eat snacks, nor was he in the mood to eat them. Therefore, he sat there with his eyes closed to rest. In fact, he was thinking about how to get rid of Tsukuyumi. Previously, after Tsukuyumi deactivated the Calamity Domain, Jowen had thought of escaping, but he gave up in the end. The main reason was that Tsukuyumi had spatial powers. Now, Tsukuyumi had no intention of killing him. If he failed to escape and Tsukuyumi caught up to him, it would probably be a battle to the death. Furthermore, if Tsukuyumi really went berserk, the ghost parade would erupt. Too many innocent people would suffer. If he could send Tsukuyumi away peacefully, Jowen would be very willing to give it a try. According to Sei Gasakai, most calamity creatures will leave Earth not long after they are born. A small portion of them disappear, and no one knows where they went. However, they basically never appear on Earth again. They've probably left Earth. Although I don't know why calamity creatures leave Earth, there must be some restrictions. I wonder if Tsukuyumi will be affected by these restrictions? If she will be affected as well, I just need to last until she has to leave. Then I'll win, right? Jowen thought to himself. However, stalling for time was one thing. It was impossible for Jowen to sacrifice himself. Just as Jowen was thinking about how to stall for time, Sasser's expression darkened. The corners of his eyes twitched as he had the urge to kill. Jowen didn't know the etiquette of a movie theater, much less Tsukuyumi, who was a dimensional creature. Although she had already transformed into a human and dressed up, she was still a dimensional creature. While Jowen was thinking, Tsukuyumi was munching on melon seeds. Although the cracking sounds weren't loud, it made Sasser feel uneasy. Young people, you can't eat melon seeds during a movie. This is basic etiquette. Before the movie began, Sasser decided to remind them. However, Tsukuyumi ignored him. This was because in her eyes, apart from Jowen, she didn't need to care about any other humans. They were life forms that were inferior to ants. There was no need to care about their feelings. Jowen turned his head to look at Sasser, and saw that it was an old man with a head full of white hair. He apologized before saying to Tsukuyumi, "Don't eat melon seeds when watching the movie later." Tsukuyumi nodded slightly before placing the melon seeds to the side and stopping eating. Seeing that their attitudes weren't bad, Sasser's mood improved slightly. "Since the movie hasn't begun, I'll spare you for now." Soon, the movie started playing. It was an old movie called Deadly Magic. In fact, in recent years, the movies shown in cinemas were basically old movies. It was not only because of nostalgia, but also because there were very few new movies being made. Sasser already knew all the details of deadly magic like the back of his hand, but he was still very engrossed every time he watched it again. The movie began. Only then did Sasser pick up the Coke and popcorn and enjoy the classic that delighted him. However, not long after, he suddenly saw Tsukuyumi stand up and say to Jowon, "Watching boring movies here is a waste of time. Let's go." With that said, Tsukuyumi turned around and walked towards the exit. Jowon was delighted when he heard that. He stood up and walked out with Tsukuyumi. A creature at Tsukuyumi's level had almost endless lifespans. She said that it was a waste of time because she was under some kind of restriction. Time had an extraordinary meaning to her. This made Jowon feel that his previous guess wasn't wrong. Tsukuyumi would have no choice but to leave Earth for a certain period of time. This was very beneficial to him. Jowon was delighted, but Sasser was about to explode from anger. Boring movie! A waste of time! Sasser's gaze turned abnormally terrifying. It's already unforgivable to leave early in front of such a great movie, yet you still dare. Sasser slowly stood up. In all his years of watching movies, this was one of the few times he had left early. "Isn't this movie good? We can switch to another one," Jowon said as he walked alongside Tsukuyumi. "I don't like those boring movies," Tsukuyumi said. "Then what do you like?" Jowon asked. Tsukuyumi lowered her head and thought for a moment. After a while she said, "I don't know. Anyway, I don't like watching movies." As the two of them spoke, they had already arrived at the cinema's entrance. Sasser followed. When he heard Tsukuyumi's words, the killing intent in his heart burned even more. He stood on the steps as a faint energy fluctuation emitted from his body. "How dare you look down on movies? Then I'll let you have a taste of being killed by a movie." Sasser's eyes were cold as he secretly gathered his strength in his hand, transforming it into a camera. He aimed it at Tsukuyumi and Jowon and pressed the camera button. In the next second, Jowon and Tsukuyumi, who had just walked down the steps of the cinema's entrance, suddenly realized that their surroundings had changed drastically. The original streets had vanished, and the entire city seemed to have suddenly vanished. It should have been night, but the sun was shining brightly here. In front of them was the blue sea, blue sky, and a beautiful huge ship. Seagulls were flying in the blue sea and blue sky. The two of them were standing on the ship. A gentle breeze blew past, making them feel very comfortable. Jowon was somewhat surprised as he circulated his essence energy art, but he realized that he couldn't use it. Not only was he unable to use his essence energy art, but he couldn't even summon his companion beast. It was as though he had become an ordinary person. "Can you use your powers?" Jowon asked Tsukuyumi. Tsukuyumi shook her head slightly and said, "No." Jowon's expression changed slightly. If even Tsukuyumi couldn't use her powers, things would become very troublesome. Could it be that the monarchs of the dimension have discovered that I'm not dead and want to cross dimensions to kill me? Otherwise, who would have the ability to trap Tsukuyumi? Jowon was alarmed as he constantly changed his essence energy art, hoping that it would be of some use. Soon, when Jowon circulated the Tao Sutra, the essence energy that hadn't reacted finally reacted, but it still couldn't circulate. However, this made Jowon somewhat delighted. At critical moments, I still need to rely on the Tao Sutra. From the looks of it, we have been pulled into a domain limited by some rules. If the Tao Sutra advances further, I might be able to break out of this predicament. I just don't know if the opponent will give me the time. Jowon looked around. Now that he couldn't resist, it was too easy for the enemy to kill him. However, all Jowon saw were ordinary humans. No, it shouldn't be called ordinary humans. The humans here were much weaker than ordinary humans. They seemed to have never cultivated. Chapter 1136. Boom. Just as Jowon was looking around, he suddenly felt the ground beneath his feet tremble violently. Then, he heard a loud crash before an ear-piercing creaking sound. Before Jowon could figure out what was happening, the ship's massive body began to tilt to the side. At the same time, there was a dull explosion. It was unknown where the ice came from, but it smashed into the deck. The shattered ice smashed into people, causing many of them to bleed. Cries and screams intertwined as the ship flipped more and more violently. Many people fell and slid down. It was unknown where an explosion had occurred, but a heat wave swept over, sending Zhou and Tsukuyomi flying. Zhou didn't know what the hell this place was. Not only was he unable to use his essence energy skills and various abilities, but his body had also become extremely weak, as though he had never cultivated. Thankfully, his strength and abilities were difficult to use, but his skills and reactions were still there. When Zhou rolled down, he grabbed the railing and didn't let himself fall into the sea. Previously, Zhou had suspected if Tsukuyomi could use her abilities, but he soon realized that Tsukuyomi couldn't use her strength either. She grabbed a metal pillar at a height higher than Zhou, but the cabin beside her suddenly exploded. The fragments smashed into Tsukuyomi's head, immediately causing her to bleed. She seemed to show signs of fainting as she fell down and rolled out of the deck, about to fall into the sea. The temperature of the seawater was already below 0 degrees Celsius. If it were in the past, Zhou could have gone down to take a bath at such a low temperature, but now their bodies had become like ordinary people. If they fell, it wouldn't take long for all their heat to be sucked away by the seawater. When that happened, only death awaited them. Zhou subconsciously reached out to grab the semi-conscious Tsukuyomi and pulled her over. Although this was a good opportunity to kill Tsukuyomi, Zhou felt that this was likely an operation targeted by the dimensional monarchs. Tsukuyomi had suffered an undeserved calamity. The enemy of an enemy was a friend. Perhaps saving Tsukuyomi today would give the dimension another calamity-grade enemy in the future. At the end of the day, Tsukuyomi was a calamity creature born and raised on Earth. She was somewhat different from the monarchs of the dimension. "How are you?" Zhou realized that the wound on Tsukuyomi's forehead was very deep. A few metal fragments had pierced in and she kept bleeding. From the looks of it, the situation wasn't good. Tsukuyomi opened her mouth but didn't make a sound. Her eyes had already lost focus, and she was on the verge of fainting. Zhou gritted his teeth and ran up the deck with Tsukuyomi, hoping to find something that could be used as a lifeboat, even if it was just a floating plank. Once the ship sank, the body of an ordinary person would not be able to last long in the water that was mixed with ice. They had to leave the water to have a chance of survival. However, there were people fleeing for their lives everywhere. Some people jumped into the sea without any regard, hoping to leave the ship as soon as possible. They didn't want to be sucked to the bottom of the sea by the suction force produced when the ship sank. From Zhou point of view, that was courting death. There were also people who found tools like lifeboats and jumped into the sea, using them to escape. However, there were too many people escaping. In order to survive, many people desperately climbed onto the lifeboats beside them. As a result, there were too many people on the lifeboat. The lifeboats flipped over and everyone on the boat fell into the sea. There were also a few crew members who were organizing children and women to board the lifeboat. Zhou looked around and didn't find anything that could be used as a boat. The nearby hatches were all metal, making it impossible to use them as raft. All Zhou could do was carry Tsukuyomi and constantly rush up, constantly searching for something, hoping to find something that could save his life. After losing his strength, Zhou realized that the strength of humans was pitifully small. Just running with Tsukuyomi in his arms made his heart beat rapidly. His limbs ached and he couldn't breathe. The Tao Sutra kept circulating intermittently as Zhou tried his best to engrave the heaven-opening scripture of the highest elder on the wheel of destiny. However, due to the strange power here, the difficulty of engraving was too high. The shallow marks carved on the wheel of destiny quickly vanished, preventing him from engraving the complete heaven-opening scripture of the highest elder. As he was climbing up, a black shadow suddenly smashed down from above. Zhou dodged to the side and the item smashed into a metal pillar beside him. Only then did Zhou realize that it was the panel of a table. Got it. Zhou was overjoyed. Seeing that the table was about to slide down, he hurriedly rushed over and kicked it, sending it into the sea. After the table fell, Zhou jumped down as well and fell into the sea with Tsukuyumi. Tsukuyumi's face was covered in blood and she was completely unconscious. When the seawater washed over her, the blood on her face immediately spread in the seawater, dyeing the nearby seawater red. The bone-chilling seawater made Zhou shiver involuntarily. He hurriedly pulled the unconscious Tsukuyumi onto the floating table. However, the buoyancy of the table couldn't withstand the weight of the two of them. A portion of it sank. Zhou's calves were soaked in the seawater as he felt his body heat rapidly drain. Furthermore, the waves would splash over from time to time, hitting their bodies and faces. It was so cold that they shivered. A lifeboat was rowing past them. Sitting on it were a few women and children. As they rowed, they watched Zhou and company. "There's still room for one more person on the boat," a woman shouted at Zhou. Zhou looked at the unconscious Tsukuyumi in his arms, gritted his teeth, and handed her over. The women pulled Tsukuyumi onto the lifeboat. The lifeboat's waterline was almost at its limit, so it was impossible for Zhou to board it again. Zhou waved his hand at them, indicating for them to leave first. Without Tsukuyumi's weight, the table rose quite a bit, but it was still soaked in the seawater. As Zhou stood on it, a portion of his calves were still soaked in the seawater. They were numb from the cold and appeared purplish-black. At that moment, he couldn't care less. As he paddled with all his might, he tried his best to let the table surface. At the same time, he constantly engraved the heaven-opening scripture of the highest elder and infused his insights from 100 years of imprisonment into it. Without the augmentation of his essence energy, it was very difficult to leave a deep mark on the wheel of destiny with just his will. However, with the changes in Zhou's will, even without the augmentation of his essence energy, the marks became deeper and deeper. Before long, Zhou finally succeeded in engraving the heaven-opening scripture of the highest elder. The moment the heaven-opening scripture of the highest elder appeared, Zhou felt the essence energy in his body surge out like spring water. It instantly nourished his body and restored his original strength. The cold seawater could no longer harm his body. How did this happen? Sasser kept watching the scene on the camera. When he saw that Zhou could use essence energy in the movie world, his expression turned ugly. Although his life soul was magical, it could only send people into the movie world. It couldn't control the plot in the movie. All he could do was watch helplessly as Zhou recovered his strength. Suddenly, Sasser felt a mysterious force flow into his life soul, causing the movie world in the camera to change. Chapter 1137. Sasser had a look of horror on his face. He realized that he couldn't control his life soul. The movie world that shouldn't have been changed had undergone a huge change. Why is this happening? Who is controlling my life soul? Impossible. Sasser looked around, but he didn't find a single shadow. He was even more alarmed. He couldn't even discover where the other party was, but the other party had controlled his life soul. This was just too terrifying. Sasser desperately tried to retract his life soul and dispel the movie world, but it was already too late. The camera-like life soul seemed to have its own consciousness as it crazily absorbed Sasser's essence energy. In just a moment, Sasser's face was as pale as snow, and his cheeks had clearly thinned. Zhou had just recovered his essence energy when he suddenly saw a huge dark cloud storm form in the sky. A torrential rain poured down as lightning constantly flashed and rumbled in the sky. The strong winds blew the seawater, forming layers of huge waves that surged over. What was even more terrifying was that the heaven-opening scripture of the highest elder that Zhou had just condensed shattered again. What a powerful taboo power! Even the heaven-opening scripture of the highest elder can't withstand it. Are the monarchs of the dimension trying to kill me? Zhou was once again reduced to his original form, turning into an ordinary person. Amidst the storm, Zhou was thrown into the seawater by a huge wave. He kept tumbling in the bone-chilling seawater and finally rushed out of the water with great difficulty. He felt like his body was about to freeze. Bam! Another huge wave smashed over as something smashed into Zhou. Zhou hugged the item and rolled out in the seawater. It felt like a person. When he stabilized his body slightly and rushed out of the water with the person, he realized that it was Tsukuyumi who had smashed into him. Not far away, there were women and children who had fallen into the water. In such a storm, even if there were lifeboats, they couldn't escape. They were instantly swept into the depths of the sea. Many people could have survived, but now, not a single one of them would probably survive. Zhou hugged Tsukuyumi and felt that her body no longer had any warmth. She was probably not far from death, so he felt extremely repressed. He wasn't sad about Tsukuyumi's death, but even the lives of calamity-grade creatures had been played by the dimensional monarch. He had also been played by them. Seeing so many humans die like ants, the anger and indignation filled Zhou's chest, almost making it explode. However, Zhou knew very well that no matter how angry he was, it was useless. The world wouldn't change because of a human's anger, nor would it change the rules because of human emotions. The only thing he could do was to turn his anger into motivation and work hard to understand and use the rules until he became the person who customized the rules. Under the onslaught of the huge waves, not to mention the humans, even the huge ship had completely sunk. With the sunken ship as the center, a huge whirlpool of seawater formed. Zhou carried Tsukuyumi, whose fate was unknown, and was swept into the sea. His body constantly slammed into things that were swept down by the seawater, but his frozen body almost didn't feel any pain. Sasser was about to turn into a mummy. Although he had advanced to the Terror grade after fusing with the Guardian, the power of the Terror grade still couldn't withstand such a terrifying suction. Who's behind this? Who is it? Unforgivable. Absolutely unforgivable. Sasser's eyes were red as they emitted a violent red glow. He wasn't angry because he had been used or even died. The reason why he was angry was that the original movie world had been destroyed to an unsightly state. Although he had killed people in the movie world, he would never destroy the ending of the movie world. However, under the influence of the terrifying power, the male and female protagonists in the movie world had been completely destroyed, making a touching movie completely lose its meaning of existence. Unforgivable. Unforgivable. The last bit of strength in Sasser's body completely erupted. The camera in his hand emitted smoke everywhere as sparks constantly shot out as though it was leaking electricity. And in the movie world in the camera, everything that happened was rewinding, as though someone had pressed the rewind button while watching a movie. Sasser wanted to repair the destroyed movie world. He absolutely couldn't tolerate the classic in his eyes being destroyed. Even if he had to gamble his life, he wouldn't hesitate. Zhou, who was constantly deducing the Tao Sutra, suddenly felt the time and space around him strangely reverse. Even the life marks he had already engraved had vanished. Rules. Rules. Only by understanding all the rules can I use them. Zhou forced himself to calm down in the chaotic spacetime. He engraved the heaven-opening scripture of the highest elder over and over again, correcting his understanding of the rules. Many people believed that not having rules and being unrestrained was true freedom, but Zhou believed that without rules and restrictions, there would be no freedom. Only by understanding the rules and grasping them could one truly obtain freedom. Lawlessness wasn't freedom. It would only lead to destruction. That wasn't what Zhou needed. Blood spewed out of Sasser's mouth as he looked like a ferocious ghost. The terrifying force forcefully pushed the movie world forward, allowing the movie's plot to continue moving forward. Sasser had already tried his best, but he still couldn't stop it. F***ku. Come back. The blood vessels on Sasser's body exploded as he bled from his 7 orifices. His blood burned as the movie's plot rewound again. However, the force increased again, causing the plot to continue moving forward. Sasser completely ignored his life as he released his vital potential again and again, forcefully rewinding the movie's time. After all, this was Sasser's life soul. Although the force was extremely terrifying and stronger than Sasser's, it was momentarily in a stalemate under Sasser's desperate efforts. It fast-forwarded and rewound at times, and the entire movie world's timeline constantly changed. In the chaotic time and space, the marks on Zhou Wen's wheel of destiny deepened. Be it rewinding or fast-forwarding, the effects on the marks decreased. Zhou Wen finally engraved the heaven-opening scripture of the highest elder again. However, it didn't end this time. Zhou Wen engraved life marks on the opened heaven-opening scripture of the highest elder. The life marks transformed into sutras that constantly appeared on the heaven-opening scripture of the highest elder. They were all Zhou Wen's insights into the rules. As the sutras appeared, the glow of the heaven-opening scripture of the highest elder intensified. The movie world's influence on Zhou Wen decreased, and it was even affected by the heaven-opening scripture of the highest elder. Boom! A strange light bloomed in the movie world. Chapter 1138. In the chaotic movie world, there was a storm and dark clouds. Bolts of lightning streaked across the sky as though huge waves were devouring everything. However, a human emitted a holy glow as he slowly surfaced from the seawater. It was none other than Zhou Wen, who had fallen into the seawater. He hugged Tsukuyomi in one hand and held a mysterious ancient scripture in the other. The characters on the ancient scripture emitted a mysterious glow. Zhou Wen was in the movie world, but the powers in the movie world were no longer able to affect him. However, this wasn't the outcome Zhou Wen wanted. He looked at the ancient scripture in his hand. The scripture light on the ancient scripture rose, illuminating the entire space. The dark clouds dispersed, the wind stopped, and the rain stopped. Amidst the mysterious holy light, the humans that had been swept to the bottom of the sea retreated one by one. Finally, the huge ship slowly floated up from the bottom of the sea. The entire movie world's timeline was rewinding. The mysterious power that had resisted Sasser suddenly vanished, leaving only Sasser's power and the power of the heaven-opening scripture of the highest elder resisting. In the beginning, Sasser also wanted to reverse time and rewind the plot to a normal time. But now, not only had time rewound to a normal time, but it was also constantly rewinding. It was about to return to the beginning of the movie. Sasser wanted to stop it, but he realized that his strength was no longer able to resist the power that reversed time. Despite his best efforts, the movie was still rewound to the beginning. The camera screen turned into a snowflake. Bam! The camera, which was already filled with sparks, finally exploded. As the camera exploded, Zhou Wen and Tsukuyomi appeared out of thin air in the movie world. Almost at the same time that the camera exploded, Sasser spewed out blood from his mouth. His body, which was almost deformed, forcefully transformed into a stream of light and shot into the big screen that was playing the trailer in the cinema before disappearing. Zhou Wen stood on the steps in front of the movie theater with Tsukuyomi in his arms. The commotion had already attracted the attention of many passers-by. At that moment, everyone was staring at Zhou Wen and Tsukuyomi. Tsukuyomi, who was being carried by Zhou Wen, slowly opened her eyes as her injuries rapidly healed. Her expression was gentle and her eyes were glazed over. She looked at Zhou Wen and said shyly, "You saved me. I'm yours in the future." With that said, Tsukuyomi closed her eyes. A charming blush rose on her beautiful face, making one unable to help but have evil thoughts. Although they didn't know what had happened, the people around them applauded when they heard Tsukuyomi's confession. Some even shouted, "Kiss her! Kiss her!" Zhou Wen looked at Tsukuyomi and suddenly threw her to the ground. This action left everyone dumbfounded. Tsukuyomi reacted very quickly. Just as she was about to fall to the ground, her figure flashed and she stood up. Jowen left without looking back as Tsukuyomi hurriedly chased after him. F***ck, this guy is too awesome. Such a beauty confessed in front of everyone, and he just fell. After falling, the beauty still chased after him. Why haven't I encountered such a good thing? God is really blind. Why didn't that beauty fall for me? Why? Tsukuyomi chased after her and asked. Why? I should be asking you. Do you take me for a fool? You were the one who controlled the movie space, right? Jowen glared at her and said. Previously, Jowen had imagined that the dimensional monarch was attacking him, so he didn't suspect Tsukuyomi. However, after shattering the movie world, he realized that the other party was likely at the terror grade and definitely not the dimensional monarch. Otherwise, even with the terror transformation of the heaven-opening scripture of the highest elder, it would be impossible for him to shatter the movie world so easily. Jowen refused to believe that a terraform life soul could nearly kill Tsukuyomi. Tsukuyomi's eyes narrowed into crescents as she said with a smile, "Didn't you say that free love needs romance? Isn't it romantic enough for a hero to save a beauty and for the beauty to repay him with her body?" Jowen was somewhat speechless as he looked at Tsukuyomi. He was momentarily at a loss for words. All he could do was shake his head and continue walking forward. Is that wrong? I read that's what's written in your human novels. There's nothing wrong with it. Tsukuyomi took out her phone and clicked on Chidian Chinese. She read it again and felt that she hadn't done anything wrong. Tell me what I did wrong. I'll change it next time. Tsukuyomi followed and asked in all seriousness. Please act more realistically next time. Don't let me see through it, all right? How could Jowen explain it clearly? All he could do was give a casual reply. I see. Lying to the other party and not being seen through by the other party. Is this free love? Tsukuyomi nodded in thought as though she had come to some enlightenment. A dark cloud hung over Jowen's head when he heard that. He decided to speak less to Tsukuyomi in the future. The more he spoke, the more mistakes he would make. It was best not to speak as much as possible. Now, Jowen could tell that Tsukuyomi had no intention of killing him. Furthermore, she seemed to have a favor to ask of him. What do I have that Tsukuyomi is coveting? Could it be that heavenly happiness token? However, Dragon Girl previously told me that the heavenly happiness token can allow her to escape the restrictions of dimensional zones. Now that Tsukuyomi has long escaped the restrictions of dimensional zones, why does she still need the heavenly happiness token? Could it be that it's not the heavenly happiness token? However, Jowen thought for a moment. Apart from the heavenly happiness token, there didn't seem to be anything worth Tsukuyomi's effort. If she wanted something like the immortal culling sword, she could snatch it. There was no need for her to marry him. After some thought, only the heavenly happiness token needed Tsukuyomi to do these things. This was because the heavenly happiness token was something that was useless even if it was snatched away. What the hell is the heavenly happiness token that Emperor of Shang gave me? Jowen really wanted to head to the dimension to ask Emperor of Shang, but unfortunately, the only path he knew was in Chess Mountain. The Arch of Chess Mountain was probably even more difficult to deal with than Tsukuyomi. Jowen didn't want to provoke her. How long can this Tsukuyomi stay on Earth? Jowen secretly paid attention to Tsukuyomi and realized that she was browsing the website with her phone. He had bought the phone for her. However, from Tsukuyomi's leisurely manner, it didn't seem like she was in a hurry to leave. Could I have guessed wrong? Not all calamity-grade creatures need to leave Earth? Jowen was somewhat depressed. Since he couldn't escape it, Jowen could only get used to it. Tsukuyomi had been playing with her phone the entire time, so he took it out and prepared to try the bloodline function he had previously activated. Banana Fairy and Demonic Neonate are my main combat strength. I can try to add some useful life providences to them. If Dr. Darkness and Explosive Fiend Man have some powerful life providences, they can become stronger. they might have a chance of advancing further. I wonder if there's any life providence that can resolve Truth Listener's problem. Zhou browsed through all the companion beasts he had. They weren't differentiated by their levels, only their life providences. As long as their life providences were good enough, it didn't matter if their levels were low. After looking for a while, Zhou discovered many companion beasts that weren't of high levels, but their life providences were very unique. They could even be said to be abnormal. Chapter 1139. The ancient splitting tadpole's split life providence was an extremely powerful life providence. It split into an individual that was equivalent to its strength. Many companion beasts' strength would increase exponentially after possessing this life providence. However, the ancient splitting tadpole was too rare. Zhou had only obtained one up to now. The success rate of the bloodline function was so low, so it was almost impossible to use an ancient splitting tadpole to produce a split life providence. However, although the epic dark gold tadpole was much weaker than the ancient splitting tadpole, its life providence was the same as the ancient splitting tadpole. They were both split life providences. He couldn't bear to use the ancient splitting tadpole, but the dark gold tadpole didn't have that many qualms. It's time to show my true skills. Zhou carefully counted and saw how many dark gold tadpoles he had. He realized that there were more than 300 of them. In the past, Zhou had farmed many times, hoping to get another ancient splitting tadpole, but he failed to get one to drop. However, he had farmed many epic dark gold tadpoles. He originally thought that they were useless, but now they came in handy. Who should I test it on first? Zhou thought for a moment and felt that he couldn't directly use Banana Fairy and Demonic Neonate as experiment. If there were any drawbacks to the bloodline function, it wouldn't be worth it. Zhou thought for a moment and summoned the Bronze Sparrow Sword. He planned on using the Bronze Sparrow Sword to test if the bloodline function could really allow him to have 2 life providences without any injuries. He placed the Bronze Sparrow Sword as his main pet and chose a dark gold tadpole as a bloodline sacrifice. After clicking start, the phone screen flashed and the dark gold tadpole vanished. The Bronze Sparrow Sword was still there. Failure is the mother of success. Let's do it again. Zhou had plenty of dark gold tadpoles, so he didn't care about 1 or 2. He placed another dark gold tadpole and chose bloodline transfer again, but it still failed. I have plenty of companion beasts. Again. Zhou was already mentally prepared and knew that it wouldn't be that easy to succeed. Therefore, Zhou placed the dark gold tadpole again and again, but he didn't succeed even once after 10 consecutive tries. Failure is the only way to success. As long as the bricks are laid down well, there's no path that can't be walked. If 10 bricks aren't enough, I'll lay down 10 more. Zhou continued clicking. Bam, bam, bang. However, there were still continuous failures. After smashing 30 ancient tadpoles in a row, there was not a single success. Is the success rate of bloodline transfer that low? Zhou's heart began to pound. He wanted to give up, but he was a little reluctant. If he gave up now, then the 30 dark gold tadpoles would have been wasted. If 30 doesn't work, I'll throw another 30. I don't believe it won't work. Zhou threw another 30, but it still failed. I don't believe it. Even if the success rate is only 1%, I should be able to succeed if I throw another 30 to 40, right? Zhou gritted his teeth and threw another 40. The idea was good, but the reality was cruel. A total of 100 dark gold tadpoles smashed down, but they didn't succeed even once. The success rate can't be that low, right? Not even 1%? Don't tell me it's 1,000th? Zhou mumbled to himself. If there was only a 1 in 1,000 chance of success, then his 300 or so dark gold tadpoles might not be able to produce 2 life providences. Now it was no longer a matter of experimentation. Zhou thought for a moment and felt that this wasn't a solution. Without continuing using bloodline transfer, Zhou first went to the bathroom to remove the dirt in his body. Then, he washed his hands and cleaned himself up. He bowed in all directions with both hands before taking out his phone again. Then, he placed a companion beast on it. This time, Zhou didn't release the bronze sparrow sword. Although it was very powerful, Zhou didn't lack weapons. Without knowing if he could succeed, Zhou felt that it was better to bet on Explosive Fiend Man. Even after releasing the dark gold tadpoles, he still failed again and again. This situation was already within Zhou expectations. Now, he didn't wish for a high success rate. It was fine as long as he could succeed once with the remaining 200 dark gold tadpoles. Zhou felt like he was setting off firecrackers. With a bang, it would be reduced to ashes, leaving nothing behind. Again and again, the atmosphere of celebrating the Chinese New Year came out, but he didn't succeed once. Coupled with the 100 failures from before, more than 300 dark gold tadpoles quickly vanished. There were less than 50 left, but he still didn't see any hope. No way. Although Zhou didn't mind failure, he was still somewhat depressed. At the same time, he felt that the bloodline function was too useless. With such a success rate, unless it was a companion beast with the number of musical sprites, it would be very difficult to succeed. The last 30 were still unsuccessful. The last 20 still didn't succeed. Zhou continued releasing companion beasts in disappointment. Just as he was about to use the bloodline transfer function again, Tsukuyumi, who was playing with her phone, put down her phone and walked over to Zhou. As she walked, she asked, "What are you playing? It looks like it's fun." Zhou hurriedly put down his phone and looked at Tsukuyumi. "A cell phone game. Do you want to play?" "How do you play cell phone games?" Tsukuyumi asked curiously. "Give me your phone. After I download it for you, you can use your phone to play." Zhou placed the mysterious phone in his pocket and took Tsukuyumi's phone. Then, he logged onto the website, hoping to download Huang Ji's mobile game, Dimension. However, when he searched for Dimension, Zhou was somewhat dumbfounded. He realized that Dimension was already first on the mobile game rankings. Furthermore, the number of downloads far exceeded the second place. The difference was huge. The second place's downloads weren't even a fraction of Dimension's. Is it the same game? Zhou suspected that this Dimension game only had the same name as the game Huang Ji had created. However, on careful look, the icon for Dimension was still the same as before. It hadn't changed at all. Could it really be the same game? Has Huang Ji's Dimension really become popular? Zhou tried to download it. The client was clearly much bigger than before. Thankfully, the internet speed was rather good. It took him nearly half an hour to download the game. After entering the game, Zhou still couldn't be sure if this was the mobile game Huang Ji had created. Be it the graphics or the controls, it was much better than the previous Dimension. It was on a completely different level. However, the most basic mode was still the same as Dimension. Only when Zhou went to Dimension's official website and realized that the game planner's name was Huang Ji did he confirm that this Dimension was indeed the mobile game from before. Chapter 1140. After a brief search online, Zhou realized that the mobile game Dimensional's popularity far exceeded his imagination. Many humans were playing Dimensional all over the world. Now, the game dungeons were no longer limited to the few dungeons in Luoyang. Many dungeons could be found all over the world. Of course, most of them were dungeons that humans had already finished searching, but it was considered quite complete. Zhou chose a few dungeons that he was more familiar with and entered the game to take a look. He realized that they were rather realistic. The various habits and actions of dimensional creatures were very realistic. After familiarizing himself with the attack patterns of dimensional creatures in-game, it would definitely be of great help in reality. For example, the runic heavy-armored warrior in the Metalwork Temple dungeon. The signs when he used the runic runes were all very realistic. Zhou was alarmed. He never expected that a mobile game he had casually created back then would become popular in the world. Furthermore, it seemed to have become a dimensional zone database for everyone. This was something Zhou never expected. Dimensional had similar functions to Zhou's phone, but it didn't have a mind connection function. It could only play dungeons that humans had already explored. As for the mysterious phone, it could download dungeons that had never been entered. There was a fundamental difference. Using a phone game to familiarize yourself with dimensional zones and dimensional creatures. You humans sure have some ideas. Tsukuyumi was very smart. After watching Zhou play for a while, she knew what the game was about. Alright, take it and play by yourself. Zhou returned the phone to Tsukuyumi. Tsukuyumi seemed to be really interested as she took her phone and played by herself. Seeing that Tsukuyumi was playing, Zhou took out the mysterious phone again and switched on the screen. He was immediately shocked. Previously, because Tsukuyumi had come over, Zhou, who was choosing a pet, had put away his phone. Perhaps when he put it away, his finger had touched a companion beast, resulting in him placing Torch Dragon on it. On careful look, he realized that the bloodline transfer had already been carried out. What surprised Zhou was that it had succeeded. There was a notification that the bloodline transfer had been successful. Zhou hurriedly looked at Torch Dragon's information. Indeed, in the Life Providence column, not only was there the life providence of the son of a world king, but there was also a split. Are you kidding me? How did it succeed like this? Zhou smashed the remaining dozen or so dark gold tadpoles at Explosive Fiend Man, but none of them succeeded. The bloodline transfer function doesn't depend entirely on luck, right? Zhou really couldn't tell what pattern there was to it. Why did Torch Dragon succeed in one try? He couldn't think too much about it now. Zhou summoned Torch Dragon in-game, wanting to see what changes it would undergo after having a split life providence. Don't tell me I'll become like a splitting tadpole that can explode after death and split into a tiny torch dragon? Zhou couldn't imagine what it would be like. In order to verify Torch Dragon's newly obtained split life providence, Zhou took Torch Dragon to the Valley of No Return, which was the Snow Valley behind. In the past, Zhou had been to Snow Valley many times, but the blood-colored avatar died for no apparent reason the moment he entered. He didn't even know how he died. Zhou had long suspected that there were terror creatures there. Now that he was going to take a look, he could also grind some dark gold tadpoles. All the way into the Snow Valley was silver snow. Other than that, there were no other creatures in the Snow Valley. However, Zhou was no longer the same as before. The moment the Wheel of Destiny activated, the Snow Valley in his eyes immediately changed. The originally beautiful Snow Valley became extremely terrifying in Zhou's eyes. In the seemingly pure snowy ground, there were countless little bugs burrowing about. They were so densely packed that they couldn't even be counted. The tiny worm looked like a maggot, but it was smaller. It burrowed through the cracks in the snow without causing any changes to the snow. However, when he saw countless tiny maggots squirming in the snow, Zhou had the urge to vomit. However, another thought suppressed the urge to vomit. Although these worms are very small, they aren't so small that I can't see them. However, I couldn't see them at all previously. Could it be that these worms are at the Terrorgrade? Zhou was shocked by this thought. There were countless worms in Snow Valley. If they were really terror creatures, it would be too terrifying. If the worms here were to fly out, they would probably be able to destroy the entire world. It can't be that they are all terror creatures, right? Zhou thought for a moment and ordered Torch Dragon to rush into Snow Valley. At the same time, he got it to activate Bright Torch Vision World to see if it could kill the worms in the snow. When Torch Dragon's Bright Torch Vision World opened, its mirror-like eyes looked at Snow Valley. The deep snow in Snow Valley immediately vanished. However, the worms didn't disappear with the snow. They remained in place and landed on the ground below. Without a doubt, Bright Torch Vision World was useless against them. Even the mythical Torch Dragon youngling couldn't see them, meaning that they might really be terregrade creatures. Zhulong's actions infuriated the little worms. On their white bodies, a pair of transparent, almost invisible wings unfurled. Then, countless worms flapped their wings and flew towards Torch Dragon like a fog. Torch Dragon couldn't see the worms, so it didn't know that danger was approaching. It still stood there in a daze. Zhou hurriedly ordered it to attack, but it was useless. It couldn't see the worms, so its strongest offensive skill, Bright Torch Vision World, was useless. Countless bugs pounced on the Torch Dragon and burrowed into its body through any possible gap. Now, Zhou finally knew how the blood-colored avatar had died in the past. Thinking of countless worms crawling into his mouth and nose, Zhou felt uncomfortable. His throat seemed to itch terribly as he couldn't help but swallow his saliva. Seeing that the countless worms had entered Torch Dragon's body and would soon kill it, Zhou ordered it to use World King transformation. Pairs of Torch Dragon eyes opened on Torch Dragon's body as its aura instantly became terrifying. Despite so many Torch Dragon eyes using Bright Torch Vision World together, they still failed to injure the worms. Instead, Torch Dragon let out a painful roar. Its body was about to be bitten through by the worms. Suddenly, Torch Dragon's body split apart, but its body didn't turn into pieces. The rows of Torch Dragon eyes that appeared on its body after World King transformation split apart. Every Torch Dragon eye transformed into a smaller Torch Dragon. In an instant, the gigantic Torch Dragon youngling turned into a group of single-eyed smaller Torch Dragon younglings. Zhou looked at the smaller Torch Dragon younglings in a daze. This was clearly different from the ancient splitting tadpoles splitting. The ancient splitting tadpoles splitting was a passive skill. It could only split after an explosion. As for Torch Dragon younglings splitting, it seemed to split on its own, splitting its body into smaller Torch Dragons. These smaller Torch Dragons were clearly not bombs, nor did they have any intention of self-destructing. Chapter 1141. Just as Zhou was feeling alarmed, he suddenly realized that the mini Torch Dragon had released World King transformation again. A group of mini Torch Dragons released World King transformation as rows of Torch Dragon eyes grew out of their bodies. At the same time, they activated Bright Torch Vision World. In an instant, the entire valley was cleared by Bright Torch Vision World. With so many mini Torch Dragons using World King transformation and Bright Torch Vision World together, it was no different from a miniature apocalypse. Apart from Torch Dragon itself, everything that could be seen vanished without a trace. However, no matter how powerful Bright Torch Vision World was, Torch Dragon was ultimately only at the mythical stage. It couldn't transform into its terror form, so it couldn't see the tiny worms. Bright Torch Vision World couldn't play its intended role. The tiny worms rushed forward again and burrowed into the tiny Torch Dragon's body, but following that, the tiny Torch Dragon began to split again. The eyes on its body split into even smaller Torch Dragons. Again and again, the Torch Dragon split 9 times in a row before stopping. It looked like the ancient splitting tadpole. The limit of the number of times it could split was 9. However, unlike the ancient tadpole, Torch Dragon didn't have a self-destruct skill. Therefore, it only split and didn't self-destruct. The number of tiny Torch Dragons that were produced 9 times was already a little terrifying. When so many tiny Torch Dragons used World King transformation and Bright Torch Vision World together, the huge snow valley had already turned into a dead zone. Bright Torch Vision World was constantly stacked. Not only did the Bright Torch Vision World not harm each other, but it also made the Bright Torch Vision Worlds might stronger by reflecting each other's Bright Torch Vision World. In the constantly reflecting Bright Torch Vision World, Zhou realized that a portion of the tiny worms had vanished as though they had been affected by the power of Bright Torch Vision World. No way. Only the power of the Terrorgrade can injure the Terrorgrade. No matter how strong Torch Dragon youngling is, it can't transform into its terror form after all. Its strength can actually kill the tiny worms. Could it be that those tiny worms aren't actually at the Terragrade? Zhou carefully observed for a while and realized that not all the tiny worms were destroyed by Bright Torch Vision World. Only a portion of them were affected. However, Snow Valley was unlucky. It had been completely destroyed and the entire Valley of No Return was affected. If Zhou hadn't been prepared, the blood-colored avatar would probably have been destroyed by the tiny torch dragons. Boom! As the ground was devoured by the Bright Torch Vision World, a terrifying sound suddenly came from beneath the valley. A huge snow-white worm crawled out of the ground. The insect was the size of a truck. Its entire body was snow-white, and it had 6 transparent wings on its back. It looked just like the other insects. As the big worm drilled out of the ground, the small worms all moved closer to it. Like water entering the sea, they merged into its body. I see. So this is the true body of a terror creature. Those tiny worms from before are just avatars it split out. However, to be able to destroy a portion of the Terragrade avatars, Torch Dragon's ability is already rather sick. Zhou immediately came to a realization. When the huge worm's true body arrived, it was clearly much stronger than the tiny worms. The tiny Torch Dragon's Bright Torch Vision World was useless against it. It flew in the Bright Torch Vision World and opened its sucker-like mouth to suck in a tiny Torch Dragon. Unlike the tiny worm, this huge worm didn't need to burrow into the Torch Dragon's body and even wanted to eat it. Seeing the tiny Torch Dragons being devoured, the other tiny Torch Dragons didn't have much ability to resist. What a pity! If Torch Dragon was also at the Terragrade, this huge worm wouldn't be its match. Perhaps it would be able to instantly kill the huge worm with a single glance. Zhou wasn't alarmed but delighted. After Torch Dragon possessed the Split Life Providence, not only did its life preservation abilities greatly strengthen, but most importantly, its offensive strength had greatly increased. Once it advanced to the Terragrade, Zhou felt that even Banana Fairy might not be able to defeat Torch Dragon. How can I advance Torch Dragon to the Terragrade? Zhou thought to himself. Before long, the tiny Torch Dragon was devoured by the huge worm. The phone system also indicated that the Torch Dragon youngling companion beast had died. Zhou summoned Banana Fairy and Demonic Neonate and activated the Wheel of Destiny. The clown mask and the heaven-opening scripture of the highest elder appeared at the same time. However, there was no need for Zhou to do anything. Banana Fairy fanned the Grand Wind, and the huge worm's massive body immediately flew up. In midair, it gradually froze and turned into an ice sculpture. Whoosh! The big bug landed on the ground, and its huge body directly shattered. However, the shattered body turned into many small bugs and gathered together once more. Banana Fairy frowned unhappily and blew out another breath. However, this time it was the solar wind. Then, the huge worm screamed and struggled in the flames, but it was useless. Its wings were burned to ashes. Regardless of whether it condensed or dispersed, it was burned to ashes by the solar wind. It had no ability to resist at all. The mighty worm from before was like a worm in front of Banana Fairy. It was burned to death with a single flick of fire. Ding! With a crisp sound, a system notification popped up. Killed Terror Creature Goo Mother. Discovered Dimensional Crystal. Isn't it a companion egg? Zhou was somewhat disappointed. He looked at the crystal that dropped and realized that it was a crystal with 87 essence energy. Zhou originally wanted to pick up the essence energy crystal for his own use, but he realized that Banana Fairy was looking at him eagerly. No, she was looking at the essence energy crystal in his hand. You want this? Zhou asked Banana Fairy. Banana Fairy nodded immediately, looking like she really wanted it. Zhou hesitated for a moment before giving the essence energy crystal to Banana Fairy. After Banana Fairy received the dimensional crystal, it immediately transformed into wisps of light that fused into her body. In a short while, the crystal with 87 essence energy completely vanished, but Banana Fairy looked as though she hadn't had enough. Zhouwen hurriedly looked at Banana Fairy's stats and realized that her essence energy had become 87, while the other three stats were still 82. I see. So Terragrade creatures are the same as humans. They need to absorb essence energy crystals to enhance their stat. They aren't born with full stats. Zhouwen was both happy and worried. He was happy that he finally knew how to continue letting Banana Fairy grow. He was worried about where to get so many stat crystals for him and Banana Fairy. Zhouwen could still use mythical stat crystals, but Banana Fairy had to use Terragrade stat crystals. They could only be obtained by killing Terragrade creatures. From the looks of it, I have to make another trip to the underground sea's sapphire sky and the endless sea of stars. Zhouwen thought to himself about the dungeons he had downloaded and which terror creatures might exist. Chapter 1142. He didn't know if the endless sea of stars planet Devourer was at the Terragrade, but the gigantic dimensional creature in the sapphire sky was definitely at the Terragrade. However, Zhouwen found it odd. Why were Torch Dragon and Qiongqi at the mythical stage, but there was a Terragrade in the sapphire sky? Could it be that the temple isn't the core of the Zhuelu ruins? The more Zhouwen thought about it, the more he felt that he was right. The sapphire sky, the longevity tree, the demon blood true dragon guardian, the white bone desert, and other places were all filled with mysteries. In comparison, the inside of the temple wasn't as mysterious. Although there was a powerful creature like Torch Dragon, it was only a juvenile. It hadn't even reached the Terragrade. After killing the Goo Mother, Zhouwen left the Valley of No Return dungeon because he didn't know how long it would take for it to respawn. He headed to the Zhuelu underground sea to hunt the terror creatures in the sapphire sky. Now, Zhouwen and Banana Fairy needed to raise their stat. As for Demonic Neonate, her stats had already reached the limit because she hadn't truly advanced to the Terragrade. She couldn't raise them for the time being. In fact, Zhouwen's situation was similar to Demonic Neonate's. However, humans had just advanced to the mythical stage. They weren't like Demonic Neonate who had their max points immediately. They still needed to slowly raise their strength. When he arrived at the underground sea, the 9 black dragons had already respawned. Zhouwen first grinded the 9 dragons and another companion egg dropped. Now, Zhouwen already had 7 demon blood true dragon companion beasts. Only the last 2 demon blood true dragons of the last 2 attributes had yet to drop. The demon blood true dragon with the Wu Dragon Pearl didn't drop a companion egg. The other demon blood true dragons couldn't be fused either. There was always a notification that they lacked the main core. This made Zhouwen suspect that the Wu Dragon Pearl's demon blood true dragon was the main core. The guardian in the war wagon was gone. Unlike dimensional creatures, guardians didn't respawn. I wonder how much the guardian in Ant City has grown. With my current strength, together with Ba Jiao and Demonic Neonate, I should be able to kill her, right? Zhouwen planned on giving it a try when he returned. After coming out of the sea, Zhouwen looked up at the sapphire sky. The behemoth could be seen from afar. The sapphire sky was clearly solid, but it was swimming around in the sapphire sky as if it was not solid, but ordinary seawater. Previously, Zhouwen had attempted to shatter the sapphire sky, but the sapphire was abnormally hard. Mythical strength could only leave shallow marks on it. It was impossible to shatter it. Zhouwen carefully observed the creature in the sapphire sky. The creature looked very strange. Its entire body was blue and translucent. Its upper body resembled a human's body, and it had arms and hands. However, its lower body didn't have legs. Instead, it had many blue ribbon-like objects. Its head was also different from a human's. It was shaped like a jellyfish, and did not have human facial features. It wandered back and forth in the sapphire sky, sweeping its gaze across the blood-colored avatar from time to time as though it was observing it. Clearly, it had long discovered the blood-colored avatar. However, for some reason, it didn't come out of the sapphire sky to attack the blood-colored avatar. From time to time, It would stick its jellyfish-like head under the sapphire sky to observe the blood-colored avatar and companion beasts outside. Could it be that the sapphire sky is actually a prison cell to it? An idea flashed in Zhou Wen's mind as he thought of this possibility. Zhou Wen had been to the underground sea countless times, but apart from being attacked when he approached the sapphire sky, he was always very safe. If it is really imprisoned here, then who imprisoned it? Why is it imprisoned here? Zhou Wen didn't have any more clues, so he couldn't think of a reason. He summoned Banana Fairy and Demonic Neonate, who summoned Grim Demon. Previously, in the battle with Di Tian, Wang Mingyuan had suppressed Grim Demon and used Grim Demon's identity to enter the cube's arena. Later, after Zhou Wen returned, Wang Mingyuan imprisoned Grim Demon on Mount Fangzhong and returned Grim Demon. However, while Zhou Wen was trapped, Grim Demon had been sealed in the demonic sword the entire time. He had no chance to come out. Now that he wanted to kill the dimensional creature in the sapphire sky, Grim Demon came in handy. Zhou Wen made the blood-colored avatar stand in the distance as Banana Fairy and Grim Demon approached the sapphire sky. Banana Fairy blew a gust of grand wind at the sapphire sky from afar, but it was blocked by the sapphire sky. It failed to blow in, so it naturally couldn't injure the dimensional creature. Zhou Wen immediately felt that something was amiss. Although the sapphire sky trapped the dimensional creature, it also blocked the person who wanted to kill it. Even the Terragrade Grand Wind couldn't move the sapphire sky. That thing was indeed no trifling matter. Seeing that the Grand Wind was useless, Grim Demon erupted with a terrifying demonic aura as he charged towards the sapphire sky. Boom! Grim Demon's punch struck the sapphire sky, forcefully creating a huge crater with a diameter of more than 2 meters. Although such destructive power was astonishing, Grim Demon's fist struck the sapphire sky. Such destructive power was astonishing, but to the entire sapphire sky, this was only a tiny gap. It was as inconspicuous as a needle's eye. Furthermore, after Grim Demon retracted his fist, the shattered sapphire automatically flew back and filled the shattered hole. Soon, it was as good as new without leaving a trace. Zhou Wen was even more alarmed. The sapphire sky's power clearly wasn't purely self-healing. It was more like an ability to reverse time. Just as Grim Demon retracted his palm, the dimensional creature in the sapphire sky emitted a blue beam of light that shot out through the sapphire sky. The dazzling light was so intense that one couldn't open their eyes. However, after passing through the sapphire sky, it became much weaker. When it finally arrived in front of Grim Demon, it was already extremely weak. Even if Zhou Wen didn't use the Wheel of Destiny, he could still see a blue light. This meant that the power of the blue light was about to reach the Terragrade, so it could be seen with the naked eye. Grim Demon was very disdainful of such weak strength. With a casual wave of his hand, he shot out a demonic aura, hoping to shatter the blue dazzling light. However, after the demonic aura came into contact with the blue dazzling light didn't shatter. Instead, it seeped into the demonic aura, causing a strange blue color to appear in the black demonic aura. Furthermore, the blue color in the demonic aura became more and more obvious. Soon, the blob of demonic aura that Grim Demon had produced turned into a blue crystal. How strange! Why can the sapphire sky block and weaken the dimensional creature's power, but the dazzling light it emits can turn the demonic aura into a substance like the sapphire sky? Zhou Wen found it odd. Chapter 1143. After some thought, he couldn't think of a reasonable explanation. All Zhou Wen could do was get Grim Demon and Banana Fairy to continue attacking. However, separated by the sapphire sky, Grim Demon and Banana Fairy's strength was almost unable to injure the dimensional creature. The blue dazzling light released by the dimensional creature was also greatly weakened. It could only barely turn the demonic aura into blue crystals. Furthermore, the blue dazzling light dissipated not long after passing through the sapphire sky. It couldn't exist for long. However, this was already very shocking. Be it Grim Demon's demonic aura or Banana Fairy's wind, they were unable to completely wipe away the blue dazzling light. Even if the power was far stronger than the blue dazzling light, it would be penetrated by the blue dazzling light and become a part of the demonic aura or wind before slowly turning into blue crystals. However, as the dazzling light was too weak, it could only transform a small portion of the demonic aura or wind into sapphire-like crystals before it was expended. After the demonic aura and wind that had transformed into sapphires were shattered, they would automatically fly towards the sapphire sky and become a part of it. What's going on? Is it imprisoned here, or did it trap itself? Could it be that it can only survive in the sapphire sky? It will die if it leaves the sapphire sky, so it has to turn everything into sapphire? Zhou thought for a moment and felt that this idea didn't seem reliable. However, since he couldn't break through the sapphire sky's obstruction, it was impossible to kill the terror creature. All Zhou could do was change his strategy and use Great Brahma in his terror form. Great Brahma was in his spirit body state. Zhou wanted to see if it could pass through the sapphire sky. The four-faced, eight-armed Great Brahma flew towards the sapphire sky. The black hole behind him was like the entrance to hell, as though it could devour everything. It also seemed as though countless evil spirits were about to crawl out. He really went through it. Zhou watched Great Brahma enter the sapphire sky. Just like the dimensional creature, Great Brahma seemed to enter water. His movements were slightly slow, but he wasn't affected much. The ribbon on the dimensional creature's lower body danced as it flashed with a blue dazzling light as it swept towards Great Brahma. As it was in the sapphire sky, the might of the blue dazzling light wasn't weakened. It was unimaginably terrifying. Great Brahma remained sitting cross-legged. His 8 hands formed different hand seals, and the expressions on his 3 faces were different. Only the face facing the black hole had no expression. Only when the dazzling blue light descended in front of Brahma did he strike out with his palm. The dazzling blue light was extinguished by Lord Brahma's palm, like a candle being extinguished. Damn, Lord Brahma is so fierce! Zhou was overjoyed. However, he could tell that the dimensional creature in the sapphire was undoubtedly in a soul state. Brahma was the best at restraining such creatures. For ghosts and spirits, Great Brahma could be said to be their natural enemy. At the same level, those creatures like ghosts and spirits could not compete with Great Brahma at all. Although the dimensional creature in the sapphire was a spirit body, it was somewhat different from ordinary ghosts. It wasn't completely suppressed by Brahma as it constantly emitted blue light to fight Brahma. Its figure was erratic in the sapphire sky, as if it could teleport. It constantly appeared in all directions of Brahma, and rays of dazzling blue light descended on Brahma's body. However, no matter how strange or powerful that dazzling blue light was, it would be suppressed by Brahma's palm, immediately becoming dim and extinguished, completely meaningless. Well done. Kill it. Zhou directed Brahma to kill the dimensional creature. However, Zhou soon realized to his dismay that Brahma didn't take the initiative to attack. He would only counterattack when his opponent attacked. However, Brahma's counterattack was clearly insufficient to directly kill the dimensional creature. It can't be. Brahma only knows how to take a beating? Zhou found it unbelievable. With his understanding of the small perfection of Wisdom Sutra, it didn't seem like this was the case. Furthermore, Brahma had 4 sides. One side was heartless, one side was blissful, and one side was compassionate. Although he didn't know what the 4th side was, just from these 3 sides, it shouldn't be something that only knew how to take a beating. Did I get it wrong? Zhou was somewhat puzzled. Zhou sank his mind into Brahma. Brahma was born by him to begin with, so it was equivalent to his avatar. Zhou immediately sensed some information about Brahma, making his expression turn odd. Although Brahma was born by Zhouwen, it didn't mean that Zhouwen understood everything about it. Brahma's power didn't only come from Zhouwen. It also came from the profundities of the small perfection of Wisdom Sutra and the Guardian's blood that served as its foundation. Therefore, the terror form of Brahma was actually a very complicated individual. Even Zhouwen found it difficult to understand everything about him. Just from the basic information, the power Brahma was using in battle was actually only a quarter of it. He had a total of 4 sides, and each side represented a different power. Now, the one that was truly used in battle was the expressionless side in front. The power of the left and right sides wasn't an ability used in combat, so they weren't suitable for use in battle. And the last side that even Zhouwen couldn't see hid extremely terrifying power. Even as its owner, Zhouwen felt his heart palpitate. It was as though there was a great terror within. Once it was activated, even as its owner, it was difficult to predict the consequences. However, this was in-game, so Zhouwen naturally didn't have any qualms. He directly activated the unknown side of Brahma. After Zhouwen gave the order, Brahma finally moved. The face that was facing the black hole slowly turned over. Zhouwen didn't know what the face looked like. As he stared at the side of his face that was turning, he suddenly realized that the surrounding scene had undergone a strange change. The black hole that was originally like a Buddhistic glow behind Brahma gradually expanded as Brahma turned around. Before Brahma could completely turn his face, the black hole had already devoured the sapphire sky. Countless evil spirits roared out, turning the entire underground sea into hell. Zhouwen only had time to see the side of Brahma's face. Before he could see it clearly, the game screen suddenly turned black. A dark cloud hung over Zhouwen's head as he was momentarily speechless. He was probably the first person in history to be killed by his terraform. What the hell? I'm the creator of Brahma after all. He's killing me too? This doesn't make sense. Zhouwen's emotions were indescribable. Chapter 1144. The fourth side of Great Brahma was definitely a killing machine. It was extremely powerful at the terror grade, but indiscriminate killing was a huge problem. Great Brahma was Zhouwen's terraform, so he couldn't be too far away from it. Otherwise, Great Brahma would automatically return to his body. Unless Zhouwen could withstand the power of the fourth side of Great Brahma, using it again would be equivalent to suicide. The power of Great Heaven incinerating seems to be somewhat similar to Truth Listener. Could there be some relationship between the two? Zhouwen felt that the power of the fourth side of Great Brahma was indeed somewhat similar to Truth Listener's 6 earrings, but it wasn't that strong. Just as Zhouwen was considering how to use Great Brahma's power, Tsukuyomi walked over. What's wrong? Zhouwen looked up at Tsukuyomi and asked. There's nothing interesting about the game. Although Tsukuyomi was holding her phone, she had already quit the game. Why don't I take you to eat something? Zhouwen said after some thought. Human food is no different from rocks to me. It's just material energy, Tsukuyomi said indifferently. Zhouwen immediately felt a headache. He could still think of ways to defeat his opponent if he were to kill dimensional creatures. However, he really couldn't guess a woman's thoughts. Have you been to school? Tsukuyomi suddenly asked Zhouwen. Of course. Zhouwen was somewhat puzzled, unsure why Tsukuyomi would suddenly ask such a question. What does it feel like to go to school? Tsukuyomi asked again. It's just learning. What else can it feel like? Zhouwen found Tsukuyomi's question odd. Then take me to school, Tsukuyomi said with a blink. School. Zhouwen was momentarily confused, unsure what Tsukuyomi meant. Dimensional creatures are born with knowledge and don't have the concept of school. I want to know what it feels like to go to school. Take me there, Tsukuyomi said seriously. I see. Zhouwen thought about it and realized that it was true. Dimensional creatures really didn't need to learn like humans. However, Tsukuyomi's request left Zhouwen in a difficult position. School wasn't a street market. It wasn't a place he could go whenever he wanted. Although Zhou was a student in the past, he hadn't graduated. However, 5 years had passed and his former classmates had long graduated. Zhou had no intention of returning to school to study. Looking at Tsukuyomi's expression, Zhou knew that he had to go. After some thought, he came up with an idea. It wasn't difficult for Zhou to bring Tsukuyomi into Sunset College, but it was too dangerous. If Tsukuyomi was unhappy and started a massacre at Sunset College, no one would be able to stop her. All of Luoyang would probably be bathed in blood. However, he had to agree to Tsukuyomi's request. Otherwise, she would immediately fall out with him. Therefore, after weighing the pros and cons, Zhou planned on taking Tsukuyomi to the Royal College for a spin and letting her play there for 2 days to experience the school's atmosphere. Royal College was a very famous university in the Federation. It was ranked above Sunset College. Even 5 years later, Royal College still existed. The Royal School generally did not accept students from outside. Only the children of the Cape family and the vassal families could attend the school. Basically, the students were all related to the Cape family. Zhou and the Cape family had a very bad relationship. Although he wouldn't go so far as to destroy the Cape family, he definitely wouldn't forget any dirty work. After making up his mind, Zhou took Tsukuyomi to the Royal College in the West District. The two of them had spatial powers, so they naturally didn't need to walk. After Zhou told them the location, Tsukuyomi teleported him over. Tsukuyomi's long-distance teleportation was fast and accurate. It was much better than Zhou's. As expected of a heavenly calamity, Zhou sighed. His level was still too inferior. It was definitely too late to complete the enrollment procedures now. Zhou didn't plan on really studying either. He only wanted to take Tsukuyomi in for a spin, so he planned on joining the classes. Royal College was a sealed school. It was very difficult for outsiders to enter, but to Zhou, it was just a matter of teleportation. Zhou and Tsukuyomi appeared out of thin air in Royal College without attracting anyone's attention. Is this the school? Tsukuyomi looked around as though she was very curious. Yes, this is one of the most famous schools of humanity, Zhou said. Whose statue is that? Why is it placed there? Tsukuyomi asked as she pointed to a spot inside the door. Zhou turned his head and saw a statue standing inside the school's entrance. The statue was of a person holding a sword and slashing at the sky. Although it was only a statue, it had the aura of splitting the heavens apart. It was as though the sword was about to slice the sky into two. Zhou looked at the statue's posture and found it somewhat familiar. He carefully looked at the statue's face and immediately came to a realization. Wasn't this statue the posture of him cleaving through the 9th firmament of the Empyrean heaven realm? This is a commemorative statue. The person carved is called Human Emperor. Zhou felt a little awkward when he introduced it to Tsukuyomi. The Human Emperor who defeated Di Tian in the Cube's arena? Tsukuyomi clearly already knew about Human Emperor's deeds. In fact, as long as one went online, it was very easy to find information about Human Emperor. It wasn't surprising that Tsukuyomi knew about it. Yes, Zhou replied with a nod, pretending that it had nothing to do with him. The two of them chatted as they walked through Royal College. Zhou originally felt that it wouldn't be difficult to join the classes in the school. Unfortunately, he had forgotten that this was Royal College. Furthermore, it only recruited students from the Cape and other families. Therefore, this college was basically filled with people from the West District. Zhou and Tsukuyomi looked like they were from the East District. After walking through the school for a while, they attracted the attention of many people. Thankfully, most students were only curious and took a few more looks at them. They had no intention of stopping them. After walking for a while, a female student finally walked over and stopped them. Are you students of Bright Prospects College? What's the matter? Zhou didn't deny it and asked. I especially admire your college's Professor Mingri. I heard that he led a team to our Royal College for an exchange. Is that true? Will he be going on stage to give a speech? Can I ask you to help me get Professor Mingri's autograph? The girl said quickly. Sorry, I don't know Professor Mingri. It's best you ask him yourself. How could Zhou know Professor Mingri? Aren't you students of Bright Prospects College? How can you not know Professor Mingri? The girl said in disbelief. I really don't know him, Zhou repeated and prepared to leave with Tsukuyumi. It's fine if you don't want to help. Why are you lying? We're clearly going to the venue, the girl mumbled and followed. The girl mumbled and followed. Zhou and company headed in the direction of the venue. Chapter 11:45. The two of them saw many students gathered at the venue in front of them. Tsukuyumi was very interested as she walked over. What are they doing? Tsukuyumi looked at the students and asked Zhou. Didn't that student say that a person named Professor Mingri is coming here to lecture? Zhou said casually. What do humans teach in a lecture? Is it the knowledge that's called science? Will they teach you how to manufacture a phone here? Tsukuyumi asked curiously. That's not necessarily true. Although Zhou didn't know who Professor Mingri was, he guessed that it wasn't scientific knowledge. Otherwise, he wouldn't be so popular. Humans in this era were far more interested in companion beasts and cultivation than scientific knowledge. Can we also listen to the lecture here? Tsukuyumi asked. Of course. Zhou found 2 seats by the side and sat down with Tsukuyumi, preparing to listen to the professor's lecture tomorrow. To their surprise, the girl who had been talking to them came over after a while. When she saw Zhou and Tsukuyumi, she walked over. Why are you sitting here? Doesn't Bright Prospects College have special seats? The girl asked in puzzlement as she looked at the two of them. We'll just sit here and watch, Zhou replied. The girl looked at Zhou and Tsukuyumi and seemed enlightened. You want to know the true evaluation of our Royal College students, right? Actually, you don't have to worry. Although Bright Prospects College isn't ranked high among the Federation's colleges, with an existence like Professor Mingri teaching at Bright Prospects College, no one dares to underestimate the students of Bright Prospects College, much less Professor Mingri. Do you admire Professor Mingri? Tsukuyumi's curiosity was piqued by the girl's words. She now wanted to know what kind of person Professor Mingri was. Of course, anyone who uses a sword doesn't admire Professor Mingri. In the Battle of East Sun Mountain, if Professor Mingri hadn't entered the dimensional creature horde alone and killed 19 mythical creatures in a row, as well as the leading terror creature, the city at the foot of East Sun Mountain would have been slaughtered. By the Buddha River, Professor Mingri assassinated the leader of the Guardians who presided over the Buddha Assembly, preventing the League of Defenders plot from succeeding. When the girl mentioned Professor Mingri's various deeds, it was as though she was a god descending to the mortal world. Zhou broke out into a cold sweat for the girl when he heard that. She spent most of her time explaining how powerful Professor Ri was and how many dimensional creatures he had killed. Unbeknownst to her, Tsukuyumi, who was beside her, was a genuine dimensional creature. Furthermore, she was an invincible calamity-grade existence, an expert that could kill her countless times with a single bite. All in all, Professor Tomorrow is handsome, good-tempered, powerful, and humble. He's the perfect Prince Charming. He's the idol of many students in our academy. The girl couldn't stop talking about Professor Tomorrow, as if she had endless praises for him. Zhou was somewhat curious when he heard that. This Professor Mingri could actually kill a terror-grade creature. His strength was already considered top-notch among humans. Moreover, from what the girl said, Professor Mingri seemed to be young and could be considered young and promising. Yueyu was also very interested. She had been waiting for Professor Tomorrow's arrival. She wanted to see what kind of person he was. The number of students in the venue gradually increased as the staff nervously busied themselves. An expert like Professor Mingri was even more famous than celebrities in the past in this society. Even Royal College didn't dare slight him. The venue was almost full. Zhou and Yueyu hadn't seen Professor Mingri, but they heard the screams of the girls. Mingri! Mingri! The girls' screams were like a tsunami. The girl beside Zhou also stood up and shouted Mingri with the other girls. However, her gaze was still searching around. Clearly, she hadn't seen Professor Mingri. Her line of sight was blocked by the people in front of her. After a while, a handsome young man walked up to the podium of the venue. At this time, the cheers also reached the roof. Fortunately, this was an open-air venue, otherwise the roof would have been overturned by the tsunami-like sound wave. Yueyu looked at the young man on the stage with interest. When Zhou saw the young man, he couldn't help but be taken aback. This was because he knew Professor Mingri. Strange, isn't his name Mingxiu? When did he change his name to Mingri? Zhou was somewhat puzzled. 5 years had turned Mingxiu from a boy to a man. He stood on the podium, calm and cultured. He gestured with his hands and the ear-splitting shouts stopped. "Thank you for liking me so much. I wonder what you want to hear me say?" Mingxiu said with a smile. "Tomorrow's sword technique," the students said in unison. Zhou was taken aback again. Only then did he recall that he was the one who had given the name Tomorrow's Sword Technique to Mingxiu. "Professor Ming, you are known as Tomorrow's Swordsman. Swordsmen don't talk about sword technique. Are you going to teach us how to dance?" A bold male student joked. Mingxiu didn't mind as he said with a smile, "This student is right. I'm a swordsman. I've only learned how to use a sword my entire life. All I can teach you is sword technique." "Professor Ming, I heard that you created Tomorrow's sword technique yourself. Is that true?" another male student asked. Mingxiu said seriously, "Tomorrow's sword technique wasn't completely created by me. The so-called self-creation in the outside world is actually just a rumor. The reason why I was able to master Tomorrow's sword technique is because of 2 crucial people." "Which 2 people?" a student immediately asked curiously. "Do you want to hear me tell a story or listen to me talk about sword techniques?" Mingxiu said with a smile. "Both." Seeing that Mingxiu had a good temper, many students cheered. "Then let's talk about sword techniques first," Mingxiu said as he began talking about sword technique. Mingxiu was already one of the few sword experts in the Federation. Although most of these students came from wealthy families and had seen many experts from a young age, they still listened with relish. Many of the things Mingxiu talked about were very novel. It was somewhat different from what they had heard before. The girls beside them were intoxicated by what they heard, their eyes filled with admiration for Mingxiu. However, after listening for a while, Tsukuyumi found it boring. The expectations she had for Mingxiu were now completely gone. In fact, at Tsukuyumi's level, Mingxiu's realm was indeed much weaker. What he said couldn't pique her interest at all. "The famous Tomorrow's sword technique among humans is nothing much," Tsukuyumi said to Zhou. "It's indeed a little lacking." Zhou nodded slightly. Although Mingxiu's realm was already considered top-notch among humans, such a realm was still lacking to Zhou. Mingxiu's realm was also slower than he had expected. Chapter 1146. When the girl beside them heard their conversation, she immediately sized them up suspiciously and asked, "Are you guys students of Bright Prospects College?" Without waiting for Zhouwen's answer, the girl seemed to come to a realization. "I know. You guys aren't students of Bright Prospects College, but tutors of Bright Prospects College like Professor Ming. You're jealous of Professor Ming because he's so popular, right?" With that said, the girl seemed to understand Zhou and company. She patted Zhou on the shoulder and said, "It's not your fault that your talent isn't good and your achievements are inferior to others. It's your fault for badmouthing others behind their backs because of jealousy. I can understand your feelings. Seeing the gap between you and geniuses widening is indeed very despairing. However, you have to be more honest. Otherwise, it's easy to get beaten up. Many of the students here are Professor Ming's students. Zhou looked around and realized that there were indeed many students glaring at the two of them. Their previous conversation had already infuriated everyone. Zhou smiled and didn't say another word. However, Tsukuyomi didn't have human thought patterns, nor did she care what humans thought. She continued saying, "The sword technique is indeed very ordinary. I'm just speaking the truth. Tomorrow's sword technique is very ordinary?" When the students heard this evaluation, they were even more certain that Tsukuyomi and Zhou were jealous of Ming Xiu. That was a sword technique that had once killed a terrorgrade creature. If such a sword technique was called ordinary, then the sword technique they practiced wouldn't be worthy of being called a sword technique, right? The students glared at Tsukuyomi. If it wasn't for her beauty, they would have long cursed at her. The girl beside them had already confirmed that Tsukuyomi and Zhou were teachers of Bright Prospects College. They were completely jealous of Ming Xiu, so they ignored them. Some of the more radical students rubbed their palms together, hoping to teach Tsukuyomi and Zhou a lesson. Unfortunately, this was a college venue. It was impossible to fight on the spot. This could be considered saving their lives. If they really dared to charge forward, they probably wouldn't be able to escape annihilation even if the tutors and the school leaders attacked together. Thankfully, Tsukuyomi didn't say anything else. Instead, she got up and prepared to leave the venue. She seemed to really feel bored. Zhou had no choice but to get up and leave with her. He also knew that leaving now was the best choice. Otherwise, if the students really angered Tsukuyomi, the consequences would be unimaginable. Upon seeing Zhou and Tsukuyomi leave, the students imagined that they had left in embarrassment and anger, so they ignored them. The small commotion attracted Ming Xiu's attention. When Ming Xiu's gaze met Zhou's figure, his body trembled slightly as an incredulous look of pleasant surprise flashed in his eyes. Sensing Ming Xiu's gaze, Zhou turned his head and nodded slightly at him. After understanding what Zhou meant, Ming Xiu held back his pleasant surprise and nodded in response. He stood on the podium and continued speaking. After leaving the venue, the two of them strolled around the school, but they left Tsukuyomi disappointed. They originally imagined that they could see a lot of human scientific knowledge and technological products. To his surprise, the school was filled with primordial energy arts and primordial energy skills. It was rare to see high-tech subjects. In fact, ever since dimensional creatures broke through the restrictions on a large scale, humans had no choice but to retreat into dimensional zones. Physics, biology, and other subjects had declined greatly. Very few people specialized in the relevant professions. Most of them only completed the required courses and passed the exams. Most of their energy was spent on cultivation and hunting dimensional creatures. Boring. Let's go. After circling around, Tsukuyomi was somewhat tired of it. Furthermore, she had completely lost her previous interest. She no longer wished to stay here. This was far different from what she had imagined going to school. "I want to meet a friend. Let's wait a little longer. Let's rest there for a while," Zhou said as he pointed at a flower bed not far away. "That swordsman of tomorrow is your friend?" Tsukuyomi seemed to have already noticed something. Their silent exchange hadn't been able to hide it from her. Yes. Zhou didn't plan on hiding it either. He knew that his previous actions definitely couldn't be hidden from Tsukuyomi. If he hadn't signaled Ming Xiu, he would probably have run down on the spot. That would only make things worse. The two of them sat down on the flower bed. The surroundings were rather quiet. "Your strength and realm are much stronger than that swordsman of tomorrow. Why don't the students know you despite his fame?" Tsukuyomi asked in puzzlement. "I don't like fame," Zhou said with a shrug. Just as Tsukuyomi was about to say something, she saw a few students walk over. Furthermore, they were looking around as though they were searching for something. "Why are you here? Did you see Professor Ming?" The girl who had been sitting beside Zhou and company was also among them. When she saw the two of them, her eyes lit up as she ran over with a few classmates. She believed that Zhou and Tsukuyomi were Ming Xiu's colleagues. Since Ming Xiu had previously come in this direction, it was very likely that he was looking for them. If she followed them, she might be able to encounter Ming Xiu. She also felt that she had the obligation to remind Ming Xiu and let him know that the two of them were bad-mouthing him behind his back. She wanted him to be careful of Zhou and Tsukuyomi. In her eyes, Zhou and Tsukuyomi were scheming B*cheese who appeared to be different on the surface. The kind and adorable Ming Xiu must have been deceived by them. He didn't know their true colors and still treated them as friends. In the future, he might be secretly harmed by them. The more she thought about it, the more she felt that she should let Ming Xiu know these two scheming B*cheese. It was inevitable that he would suffer in the future. Just as she was thinking, she saw Ming Xiu walk over. This made the girl feel that her deduction wasn't wrong. The girl surrounded Ming Xiu, wanting to tell him about the two scheming B*cheese. However, Ming Xiu's figure flashed and passed through them. He ignored them and arrived in front of Zhou. "Coach, I finally see you again. You've made me miss you so much." Ming Xiu gave Zhou a hug. Although everyone knew that Zhou was in Luoyang and Ming Xiu had seen him in Luoyang over the past 5 years, Zhou could be said to be identical to the real Zhou without any flaws. However, Ming Xiu knew that it wasn't the real Zhou. However, Ming Xiu had always buried this matter at the bottom of his heart and didn't say it out loud. However, he felt very uneasy, unsure of what had happened to Zhou. Only when he saw Zhou today did he finally relax. The girls gaped as they looked at Ming Xiu and Zhou. Their expressions turned abnormally odd as an ominous thought surfaced in their minds. Could it be that Professor Ming likes men? Chapter 1147. Excuse me, Professor Ming. Is he your colleague? A female student asked with a glimmer of hope. No, he's my coach, Ming Xiu replied. As he didn't know if Zhou could expose his identity, he didn't say his name. Coach. Many images suddenly appeared in the girl's mind. Time, night, location, training room, people, Professor Ming and the male coach. Professor Ming, who was only wearing a tracksuit, took off his shirt because it was too hot, revealing his sweaty, solid chest. The shameless coach had stuck close to Ming Xiu from behind, with one hand on his waist and the other on Ming Xiu's hand that was holding the sword. He had even pretended to say that he wanted to correct Ming Xiu's actions, but in the end it's not like this. It's definitely not like this. The girl from before didn't believe that Ming Xiu would be such a person. She asked eagerly, Professor Ming, your relationship with him isn't what we think, right? Ming Xiu imagined that they didn't believe that Zhou was his coach, so he said, That's right. Tomorrow's sword technique was named by coach. Without coach, there wouldn't be tomorrow's sword technique. The tomorrow sword technique is actually the name of love. The girls felt as if they had been struck by lightning, and they felt as if their faith had instantly collapsed. Ming Xiu clearly wasn't in the mood to talk to them. She pulled Zhou and said, Coach, this isn't the place to talk. Let's find a place with no one around and have a good chat. Where there's no one, let's talk. The women were petrified on the spot, and an indescribable image appeared in their minds. Zhou left the flower bed with Ming Xiu. Tsukuyomi followed silently behind them and didn't do anything out of line. Ming Xiu found a separate lounge and used a soundproof companion beast. He looked at Tsukuyomi and saw Zhou nod slightly. Only then did he chat with Zhou and tell him about what had happened in the Federation in recent years. In the past 5 years, the Dimension hadn't started a cube ranking battle, nor had it chosen a new king of Earth. However, there are already quite a lot of Guardians on Earth, and the League of Defender has been established. Many members of the Senate are from the League of Defender. Therefore, many federal decisions will be influenced by the League of Defender. The inexplicable death of the previous president, many people suspected that it was related to the League of Defender, because the previous president was anti-Guardian. Today's President Hui Haifeng did not oppose the Guardian on the surface, but he has been working hard in secret, hoping to get rid of the influence of the League of Defender on the Federation and the House of Lords. But from the looks of it now, the effect wasn't good. Although Hui Haifeng had developed the mythical fluid, it was already very difficult to advance to the mythical stage with it. It was even more difficult to advance to the Terrorgrade. The current Federation was actually still controlled by the League of Defender. There was no lack of powerful Terrorgrade Guardians in the League of Defender. In 5 years, many Guardians had grown up. You used the mythical fluid? Zhou looked at Ming Xiu and saw that his body under his clothes was in a strange crystalline state like jade. Ming Xiu nodded slightly. I'd rather become a monster than bow to those Guardians. Where's Qiuyan? Zhou asked again. He also used the mythical liquid, so he's stronger than me, Ming Xiu replied. Zhou didn't know what to say. Although he knew that humans had the possibility of advancing to the mythical stage, that path was too difficult. Apart from him, Zhou had only seen Xia Zhihuang walk over. However, it was hard to say if Xia Zhihuang had truly succeeded. After all, he had ultimately borrowed the power of the Guardian in the wood. It was impossible to verify if he had advanced to the mythical stage. Who has the final say in the League of Defender now? Zhou asked. There are 4 Guardian Heavenly Kings in the League of Defender. They are Blood Shaman, Cave Era, Hermit, and Great Skyfiend. They are all Terrorgrade existences, but they aren't the true leaders of the League of Defender. Up to now, no one has seen the true leader's true appearance. All they know is that the Guardians of the League of Defender call him immortal, Ming Xiu said. After a pause, Ming Xiu continued, apart from the League of Defender, an organization that specializes in hunting Guardians has appeared in the League. It's called the Holy Spirit Association. The entire organization is very mysterious, and it's very difficult to find traces of them. The president of the Holy Spirit Association is Ye, who previously occupied first place on the cube. From your tone, you seem very dissatisfied with the Holy Spirit Association. There doesn't seem to be a problem with them hunting Guardians, right? Zhou asked. Ming Xiu sighed and said, It's fine if it's just hunting Guardians, but they don't differentiate between good and bad. They don't care if the humans who contract Guardians are good or bad. They kill all of them. Even the humans who contract Guardians aren't spared. I really can't agree with their actions. What's the difference between such indiscriminate killing and those devils? Zhou shook his head and didn't say anything else. With Zhong Zia's personality, he might really do such a thing. After a moment of silence, Zhou asked about the people he cared about. Ming Xiu had always been paying attention and told Zhou one by one. Yer had been brought back to the Yin family and was doted on by Entienzhua. What was surprising was that even Entienzhua doted on Yer. Yer was now like the Yin family's little princess. She got whatever she wanted. Li Xian had been wandering around. Occasionally, when he returned to Luoyang, he would visit Zhou, but in fact, he was visiting Yer. As for who was impersonating the Yin family's Zhou, Ming Xiu wasn't sure either. All he felt was that he looked extremely similar. There was no way to tell the difference from his appearance. His bearing and abilities were also very similar to Zhouwen's. Unless one was particularly familiar with Zhou, it was almost impossible to tell them apart. The chick and antelope had also been settling down. The antelope hadn't changed much, but the chick was now the size of an eagle. The last time Ming Xiu went, he happened to see it burn a mythical creature to death at Chess Mountain with a mouthful of flames. Feng Qiuyan had been cultivating with Ming Xiu all these years. With the help of Ming Xiu's peerless life providences, the two of them improved rapidly. Of course, it was mainly because their talent and hard work were rare in the world. Wang Lu had officially taken over the Wang family, but no matter where she went, she would bring her younger sister. Wang Chanwei-gu replaced Shin Yuqi as the director of the Special Inspection Bureau. However, the Special Inspection Bureau had already fallen out with its original owner, the Six Families, and became a blade in the hands of the League of Defender. Many people from the Six Families had joined the League of Defender, but other than the Cape family, the other families were very repulsed by the League of Defender. The Zhang family had a rule that as long as one contracted a guardian, their names would be removed from the family tree. As the two of them were chatting, Zhou Wen suddenly sensed that someone was secretly approaching the lounge they were in. After carefully sensing it, he realized that it wasn't a pure human, but a human who had contracted a guardian. At that moment, he was wearing a guardian armor and walking towards the lounge. Chapter 1148. Zhou Wen frowned slightly. The guardian was clearly targeting them, and there was a high chance that he was looking for Ming Xiu. Zhou Wen had been missing for so many years and had just returned inland. Not many people knew him. Even if an enemy recognized him, they shouldn't have taken action so quickly. At the very least, they should have investigated his current situation. The guardian didn't deliberately hide his aura. As he approached, Ming Xiu sensed his arrival. The guardian stopped in front of the lounge. Although the door was closed, it didn't seem to affect his vision at all. He looked at Ming Xiu through the door and said, "Tomorrow, swordsman, I've heard a lot about you. Do you dare fight me?" With the guardian's arrival, many students discovered him. They whispered from afar, but they didn't dare approach. Clearly, they all knew the guardian. "I wouldn't dare," Ming Xiu said with a smile. "Tomorrow's windmark is known as the Sword and Saber Paragon. No one can match him when it comes to swords and sabers. I also use a sword, and I believe my sword techniques are passable. If I can't win in 10 strikes, it'll be considered my loss," the guardian continued. "You've already won." Ming Xiu was no longer the competitive youth from back then. He spoke casually and was not moved at all. "I never expected the famous Tomorrow swordsman to be a coward. He doesn't even have the courage to accept the challenge. From the looks of it, the so-called invincible Tomorrow swordsman is just an exaggeration used by humans to comfort themselves. A sword technique created by humans ultimately can't be shown in public," the guardian continued, provoking. This time, Ming Xiu didn't back down. He didn't care about his reputation, but there were some things that he absolutely couldn't allow others to sully. "Coach, please wait a moment. I'll be back soon," Ming Xiu said to Zhou Wen before getting up and pushing the door open. The students watching from afar were somewhat excited when they saw Ming Xiu come out. The guardian's name was Judge, and the person who contracted him was Buzz. He was a very famous guardian of the Cape family and a member of the League of Defender. Although he hadn't advanced to the Terror grade, he was already somewhat famous in the Federation with his Sword of Judgment. Ming Xiu once killed a branch leader of the League of Defender and destroyed a plan of the League of Defender in the East District. That guardian was also a member of the Cape family. Although it was rumored that Ming Xiu had once killed a Terror-grade dimensional creature, no one had seen it with their own eyes. The League of Defender had also analyzed Ming Xiu and believed that he was still at the mythical stage and hadn't advanced to the Terror grade. The rumors of him killing a terror creature weren't credible. Buzz's eyes lit up when he saw Ming Xiu. If he could defeat Ming Xiu, not only would he be avenging the Cape family, but he would also be able to make his name known throughout the Federation. Due to the battle when Zhou Wen was conferred the title of Emperor, humans were very repulsed by guardians. Even if they could accept half-humans like Ye, even if they were willing to treat mutated humans who used mythical fluid as part of the human race, they were unwilling to accept pure humans who contracted guardians. This makes humans very resistant to the League of Defender, and it also annoys the humans who contract with the League of Defender. They had clearly obtained great power, but they were unable to gain the recognition of their own race. The fame and expectations that humans like Ming Xiu who used mythical fluid obtained were something that a contractor like Buzz couldn't enjoy. Even within the Cape family, the young people of Royal College were more willing to worship Ming Xiu than Buzz and his guardian. When the outside world mentioned him, they would only mention the name Nephilic Judge. Ordinary people couldn't even remember Buzz's name. Buzz was looking forward to seeing how the people who admired Ming Xiu would react after he defeated him. Buzz had been looking forward to this ever since Ming Xiu accepted Royal College's invitation. He had already hired a professional analyst in the League of Defender to help him analyze the situation. His ability had a certain restraining effect on Ming Xiu. As long as Ming Xiu didn't advance to the terror grade, his chances of winning were as high as 70%. Ming Xiu's sword of tomorrow would give others the illusion that they could block his sword, but if they really did block it, they would realize that the strike would come later than expected. The sword of judgment could slice through the fabrications and strike at the essence. Even if Buzz made a mistake, the sword of judgment could accurately block Ming Xiu's sword. Therefore, Ming Xiu was at an absolute disadvantage against him. Royal College's combat arena should be able to allow us to fight with all our might, Buzz said as he looked at Ming Xiu. There's no need. Let's do it here. Ming Xiu reached out and grabbed the hilt of his sword. Here. Buzz frowned slightly. This was a lounge, and there were students and tutors nearby. With their strength, they would probably implicate many people if they fought here. Royal College was the Cape family's school after all. Buzz was also a member of the Cape family, so he naturally had scruples. He thought that Ming Xiu was trying to threaten him. Yes, here, Ming Xiu said as he unsheathed his sword. The moment the sword was unsheathed, Buzz's pupils constricted. He still wanted to retreat, but he only took half a step back before he stopped. Ming Xiu had already sheathed his sword. He turned around and pushed open the door before walking into the lounge behind him. It was only when Ming Xiu turned around and pushed open the door that the students and tutors nearby saw the sword flash and pierce through Buzz's abdomen. The wound on Buzz's abdomen split open, and blood immediately gushed out. He quickly covered the wound with his hand, and his face turned pale. He turned around and left without saying a word. He had to treat his injury immediately, or he would die here. The students watched in shock as Buzz retreated. When they looked at Ming Xiu again, they realized that he had already walked into the lounge, and they could only see the closed door. The sword kills first before it sees the light. This sword is too fast. Tomorrow's swordsman lives up to his name. The Nephilic Judge is considered a famous guardian, but he was defeated with one strike. This is too scary. Coach, I've kept you waiting, Ming Xiu said apologetically as he returned to the lounge. Your tomorrow's swordsmanship can be considered to be at the initial stage, Zhou said. If someone else said this, they would only be regarded as arrogant. However, when it came from Zhou, Ming Xiu's eyes lit up. Coach, can you teach me what I should do in the future? Ming Xiu asked sincerely. Before Zhou could speak, Tsukuyami suddenly said, Tomorrow is the next day. There are so many tomorrows. Which day is your tomorrow? Ming Xiu was stunned when he heard this. His eyes stared straight ahead, but he wasn't looking at anything. It was as if he had lost his focus. He stood there motionless. Chapter 1149. In the Cape family's medical room, a man stood in front of the bed. His palm was glowing as he pressed on the wound on Buzz's abdomen. Buzz's wound healed at a speed visible to the naked eye. It wasn't just the wound on his body. Even the wound on the guardian armor healed rapidly. Soon, the wound disappeared completely. I'm incompetent. I'll have to trouble you to treat me personally, Buzz said as he stood up and bowed. The man retracted his palm and said calmly, It's not your fault. Ming Xiu's swordsmanship has indeed reached an extremely high level. Not many people at the mythical stage can withstand his strike. This matter ends here. What happens in the future has nothing to do with you or the Cape family. Just do what you need to do. Sir, are you going to do it yourself? Buzz's body trembled as he hurriedly asked. He knew too well how terrifying this person was. Among the 4 directors of the League of Defender, although Hermit's reputation was not as great as that of Cave Era and Blood Shaman, anyone who knew him knew that this person might be more terrifying than Cave Era and Blood Shaman. Do what you need to do, the Hermit said. Yes, sir. Buzz hurriedly lowered his head. After sending the Hermit out, he met Belle, who had come to visit him. Belle looked at the Hermit curiously. Buzz quickly pulled her to the side and introduced her to the Hermit. Sir, this is my niece Belle. The Hermit nodded slightly and left the hospital without looking at Belle. Uncle Buzz, who was that? You seem very afraid of him. Belle asked curiously. Don't ask nonsense, kid. What are you doing here? Buzz hurriedly stopped Belle and looked in the direction the Hermit had left. He heaved a sigh of relief when he realized that the Hermit had disappeared. Uncle Buzz, you really have no conscience. I came to see you out of goodwill, but you still have such an attitude, Belle said angrily. All right, my little lady, I'm fine. I won't die. Don't worry, Buzz said dotingly. That Mingxiu is really despicable. I used to admire him so much, but he actually wanted to kill you. Fortunately, you are fine, Belle said. Buzz shook his head and said, He didn't want to kill me. Otherwise, my abdomen wouldn't have been injured. So that's how it is. In that case, he isn't too bad. Belle looked in the direction where the Hermit had gone. Seeing that there was no one there, she asked in a low voice, Uncle Buzz, was that man from the League of Defender? You were so afraid of him. He must be a senior member of the League of Defender, right? I told you not to ask. Don't even mention anything about the League of Defender in the future, understand? Buzz repeatedly reminded Belle. Belle agreed verbally, but she was thinking about something in her mind. After leaving the hospital, Belle found an excuse to return to school. When she arrived, she ran straight to the lounge where Zhou and company were. Zhou and Tsukuyami sat in the lounge and chatted. Mingxiu had been standing there motionless for quite a while. Due to Tsukuyami's words, it was unknown what Mingxiu had comprehended, but the power in his body was undergoing an earth-shattering change. This was an extremely dangerous moment, so Zhou had no choice but to guard him and prevent anyone from disturbing him. As he was chatting with Tsukuyami, Zhou suddenly sensed that someone was walking towards the lounge. Furthermore, the footsteps were very hurried. He used Truth Listener to scan carefully and realized that the person who had come was the girl they had met a few times on campus. Professor Ming, are you there? Belle came to the lounge and knocked anxiously on the door. What's the matter? Zhou opened the door and asked, blocking it. Leave quickly. The people from the League of Defender want to kill Professor Ming, Belle immediately said in a low voice when she saw Zhou. Didn't they come just now? Zhou said. Uncle Buzz only wants to defeat Professor Ming. He has no intention of killing him, but the upper echelons of the League of Defender are different. They really want Professor Ming's life. It's best you leave quickly. Leave quietly and don't be discovered. I believe he won't take action on campus because of the Cape family's reputation. If you leave campus, you have to be careful. Before Belle could finish her sentence, she was interrupted by a sudden voice. Why should I care about the Cape family's reputation? The Hermit's voice made Belle shiver. She turned her head and indeed, she saw a familiar figure walking over from the corridor. He was wearing cloak-like clothes. Although it didn't completely cover his face, it was impossible to see him clearly. The Hermit walked forward step by step. His speed wasn't fast, but there seemed to be a unique rhythm to his footstep. Every step he took seemed to be stepping on the heartbeat, causing people to feel flustered and their hearts to beat faster. Belle took 2 steps back in fright. Zhou pressed down on her shoulder and pulled her behind him. I've never seen you before. What's your name? Zhou asked when he saw that the person looked unfamiliar. He definitely hadn't seen him before. The moment I contracted the guardian, my name no longer has any meaning. The guardian's name is my name. You can call me Hermit, the hermit said as he walked. Hermit? He's one of the 4 heavenly kings of the League of Defender. Belle exclaimed softly as her face turned pale. There were more than 4 terror-grade existences in the League of Defender, but the 4 heavenly kings were the most terrifying. Even the members of the 6 families feared the 4 guardians like snakes and scorpions when they heard their names. Belle finally knew why Buzz hadn't allowed her to ask. With this person around, even if the head of the Cape family came personally, he probably wouldn't be able to stop him from killing. You aren't his match. Run. Belle turned around to persuade Ming Xiu to escape, but she saw him standing there motionless as though he hadn't heard her. Belle wanted to walk over, but she was stopped by Tsukuyumi. He can't move now unless you want him to die, Tsukuyumi said indifferently. Belle was instantly stunned. She carefully observed Ming Xiu and realized that something was amiss with him. Don't tell me he's breaking through? Belle said with a complicated expression. Yes, Tsukuyumi answered with certainty. What should we do? Why does it have to be now? Belle was anxious and momentarily at a loss for what to do. Wait for him to finish his breakthrough, Tsukuyumi said. How can we wait until then? Belle didn't know whether to laugh or cry. If she could wait, she wouldn't be in such a hurry. They could wait, but the hermit wouldn't. Belle turned her head to look out the door. To her surprise, the hermit stood outside the door and didn't rush in. Hermit? I've never heard of him. What are you doing here? Belle nearly spewed out a mouthful of blood when she heard that. Provoking the hermit was equivalent to hanging oneself in front of death. Chapter 1150. The hermit frowned as he sized up Zhou. The more he looked at him, the more familiar he found him, as though he had seen him somewhere before. However, if it was someone he had seen before, the hermit was very confident in his memory. It was impossible for him to not recall it. Furthermore, to be able to remain so composed in front of him wasn't something an ordinary person could do. After all, his entire body's rhythm resonated with the world. It was impossible for ordinary people to face him so easily. It was even more impossible for such a person to be easily forgotten. It wasn't that the hermit couldn't recognize Zhou, but because the person impersonating Zhou had slowly changed their temperament, looks, and figure over the past 5 years. As it was a gradual change, it was a subtle change. Furthermore, it was only a slight adjustment, allowing others to slowly accept the feeling that Zhou was supposed to be like this. Now that the real Zhou had appeared, coupled with the changes in his appearance and temperament over the past 5 years, it was difficult for others to connect him to Zhou unless they were very familiar with him. The hermit had only seen Zhou's photos and images in the past. To be able to find him familiar was already very sharp. How may I address you? The hermit couldn't tell Zhou's origins, nor could he tell from his attire and the items on him. Therefore, he asked, My name isn't important. What's important is who I am, Zhou said. Who are you? The hermit was rather patient as he asked again. I'm Mingxiu's coach, Zhou answered seriously. So what? The hermit stared at Zhou as he pressed his middle finger on his thumb, secretly gathering strength between his fingers. So if you came for Mingxiu, you can return now, Zhou said. When Belle heard Zhou's words, she felt that he must be crazy. Such a tone made it seem as though he didn't think anything of the hermit. It was as though as long as he was around, the hermit wouldn't harm Mingxiu. The hermit's eyes turned sharp as he stared coldly at Zhou and said, I can return, but that depends on if you really have what it takes. With that said, the hermit's fingers in his sleeve moved. After all, he was one of the 4 supervisors of the League of Defender. If he were to be scared off by a few words, how could he gain a foothold in the League of Defender? However, the hermit didn't plan on fighting Zhou head-on. In fact, that wasn't his specialty. As the hermit flicked his finger, an invisible particle flew towards Zhou. Hermits were experts in micro-abilities. In this era, many people were pursuing greater and stronger abilities. Huge monsters that looked like giant dragons attracted the attention of most people. They longed to possess such great power. Hermit, on the other hand, was different. Although he also sought to become stronger, at the same time, he sought to be small. What determines strength and weakness are often insignificant things. This had always been the hermit's belief. In fact, he had never been wrong. Relying on his micro-ability, the hermit had defeated many powerful opponents. Some of his opponents were no weaker than him, but even if their strengths were equal, his micro-ability still gave him a great advantage. It was so tiny that even a terregrade couldn't see it. Once it entered the body, it could erupt with terrifying power, catching people off guard. This crystalline crystal was already so small that it was in the ammeter range. Terregrade creatures might not be able to see its existence because it was too small. However, if such a small crystalline crystal really entered the body, it didn't even need to enter the body. As long as it approached Zhou, the explosive power would be enough to severely injure a terregrade creature. Although Zhou was only casually standing in front of the door, his life wheel had already engraved the heaven-opening scripture of the highest elder, Brahma, and the godfiend era. However, he didn't make them appear. The enhanced perception that Brahma gave Zhou was enough for him to see matter at the quark level. Although the hermit's crystalline crystal was tiny, it couldn't escape Zhou's perception. The crystalline crystal flew towards Zhou's mouth. When it tried to burrow into his mouth, it blasted his head apart. Seeing that the crystalline crystal was already by Zhou's lips, he didn't do anything. However, the hermit wasn't happy at all. Instead, he felt uneasy. In the next instant, Zhou opened his mouth and the clown face appeared on his face. With a strange smile, he swallowed the crystalline crystal. The uneasiness in the hermit's heart intensified. He desperately retreated, but it was still too late. The crystalline crystal that had been devoured by the clown mask strangely appeared behind him. As he retreated, he immediately slammed into the crystalline crystal, causing it to explode. Bam! One of the hermit's arms was blasted into a bloody mist. This was even with the hermit's extremely fast reaction and control of the crystalline crystal. Otherwise, his entire body would have been blasted apart. The hermit clutched his bloody severed arm. Without uttering a single word, he turned around and attempted to flee. "If you wish to die, continue fleeing," Zhou said indifferently, having no intention of chasing after the hermit. However, the hermit didn't flee again. He stopped in his tracks and didn't dare take another step. "Whose order was it to kill Mingxiu?" Zhou asked. "No order. Mingxiu is an enemy of the League of Defender to begin with. He doesn't need any orders," the hermit said. "Does that mean you want to kill Mingxiu yourself?" Zhou asked again. "You can say that," the hermit said through gritted teeth. "Then stay here and guard Mingxiu. If Mingxiu lives, you live. If Mingxiu dies, you die too until Mingxiu allows you to leave." With that said, Zhou turned around and returned to the lounge. Belle watched Zhou walk back in a daze as though she had seen a ghost. She couldn't help but take 2 steps back, feeling somewhat horrified. She even saw the hermit with the severed arm still standing there. He really hadn't left and was guarding the door. Who are you?" Belle looked at Zhou in surprise and finally couldn't help but ask. She hadn't seen Zhou take action at all. It was as though Zhou had only stood there and said a few words to the hermit before one of the hermit's arms suddenly exploded. Then, because of Zhou's words, one of the 4 heavenly kings of the League of Defender, the hermit, was actually standing at the door as a guard. This made her feel like she was living in a dream. Mingxiu's coach. Zhou didn't wish to say his name because there was another Zhou in the family. You. Belle stammered for a long time but couldn't think of anything to say. Or perhaps it could be said that she had too many questions to ask. She suddenly recalled that Zhou and Tsukuyomi's sword techniques were very ordinary. Back then, Belle had imagined that they were jealous of Mingxiu, but now, she suddenly realized that they were speaking the truth. Who the hell is he? Is there such a powerful existence among humans? I don't think I saw him use a guardian, nor did I see any characteristics of a dimensional creature on him. Could he be a pure-blooded human? Impossible. It's impossible for him to be a pure-blooded human. He must have hidden himself well and fused with a guardian or dimensional creature. I just can't tell. Belle looked at Zhou and then at the hermit standing outside the door. Everything was so unreal. Chapter 1151. The hermit's injured arm hadn't been healed. In fact, the hermit was good at healing. He was the one who had healed Buzz's injury. However, the injuries on his body hadn't healed. Although the bleeding from his severed arm wasn't fast, the blood slowly dripped to the ground. It was obvious that it hadn't healed. The hermit felt as though there was a strange force constantly corroding his wound, preventing it from healing. He didn't dare escape because of the existence of this force. The hermit had a vague feeling that the force was like a time bomb that could explode at his wound at any moment. Although few people had seen the hermit's true appearance, a person with a severed arm standing at the lounge's door and dripping blood still attracted the attention of many students. The news quickly spread to the Cape family. When Buzz heard that, his heart skipped a beat. His expression changed drastically as he hurriedly rushed to school. He didn't dare go to the lounge directly. Instead, he checked the situation through the surveillance cameras and watched the previous surveillance footage. When he finished watching everything, the shock in his heart was unimaginable. Ordinary students didn't know who the hermit was or what kind of existence he was, but Buzz knew very well. Facing such a powerful and terrifying hermit, that young man didn't even move his hand. He just looked at the hermit and blew off one of the hermit's arms. Moreover, the hermit had no choice but to obediently stand guard at the door. What kind of terrifying strength was this? As the clown mask in the terraform couldn't be seen by ordinary humans, much less in a video, Buzz didn't see the clown mask appear. All he saw was the hermit's arm suddenly exploding for no reason. Who the hell is he? Mingxiu actually has such a teacher? It's no wonder he was able to rise rapidly in a few years. Who is this person? He definitely didn't contract a guardian. He doesn't look like he has fused a guardian and a dimensional creature. The more Buzz watched, the more alarmed he became. The back of Buzz's shirt was drenched in sweat. He was glad that Mingxiu was the one who hurt him, and not the other way around. If he were to anger such an existence, he didn't know what the consequences would be. A person that even hermits didn't dare disobey was terrifying just thinking about it. Thankfully, Belle has formed a relationship with that person. He shouldn't make things difficult for our Cape family, right? Buzz didn't dare to delay. He immediately ordered his men to seal off the area around the lounge, preventing the students and teachers from going there. Of course, he didn't go himself and pretended that he didn't know anything. Belle stood in the lounge, feeling uneasy. She did not know whether to sit or stand. She was so nervous that her palms were sweating. In her eyes, Mingxiu was already a very powerful existence, and the hermit was even more terrifying. However, in front of this young man who seemed to be only in his 20s, he didn't seem to be as noble as she had imagined. It turns out that Professor Ming has such a powerful coach. No wonder he is so strong. But this person doesn't look much older than Professor Ming. Could it be that he only looks young, but is actually a 100-year-old monster? Yes, that must be it, Belle thought to herself. Zhou ignored Belle as he studied his primordial energy art. Previously, he had circulated the small perfection of wisdom, the Godfiend era, and the heaven-opening scripture of the highest elder at the same time. The heaven-opening scripture of the highest elder had been playing a supporting role, so there weren't many changes. However, when Zhou used Great Brahma and the clown mask at the same time, an unexpected change happened. Zhouwen kept using Great Brahma to lock onto the tiny crystal. At the same time, he used the clown mask's spatial teleportation ability to teleport the tiny crystal behind the hermit. The powers of Great Brahma and the clown mask worked on the tiny crystal at the same time, producing a special effect. Even Zhouwen never expected that the two powers could be combined in such a manner. After the clown mask's spatial ability combined with Great Brahma's negative karma fire, it formed a spatial coordinate on the injured hermit's arm. Zhouwen could directly teleport his powers there without needing to go through the intermediate process. However, the only power that could directly teleport him there was Great Brahma's negative karma fire. Other powers couldn't. Even so, it was already very sick. As long as he was struck by Zhouwen and his coordinates were marked, the subsequent negative karma fire attacks could be directly used on the wound until the other party died. Zhouwen was studying it to see if there was any possibility of the clown mask and Great Brahma fusing further. If they could cooperate further, they might be able to produce even more terrifying power. As Zhouwen was pondering, intense sword intent fluctuations suddenly erupted from Ming Xiu's body. Furthermore, his body began to undergo a strange change. His originally jade-like skin had now become as translucent as a crystal. A strange energy fluctuation gradually spread from Ming Xiu's body. Slowly, Ming Xiu's body became more and more transparent. When he vanished from their line of sight, the sword intent also vanished. Zhouwen looked at the spot where Ming Xiu had vanished in surprise. He could sense that Ming Xiu had reached the level of his terror transformation, but even after Ming Xiu's terror transformation, Zhouwen should still be able to see him with the Wheel of Destiny activated. Strangely, Zhouwen didn't see Ming Xiu. He seemed to have really vanished. However, Ming Xiu soon appeared in his line of sight again. At that moment, Ming Xiu had returned to his normal human form. He was even more normal than before. "Coach, this is Master's wife, right? She's really too powerful. She really enlightened me. I finally understood the profundities of time and completely absorbed the mythical liquid. If not for her, I don't know when I would have been able to completely absorb it." As expected of Coach, not only is he strong, but even the girlfriend he found is so strong, Ming Xiu said excitedly. Just as Zhouwen was about to explain, Tsukuyami smiled and handed a sword to Ming Xiu. "Treat this as a greeting gift from Master's wife." "Thank you, Master's wife." Ming Xiu received the sword happily. He didn't really think that the sword was good. He was just happy. However, when he truly experienced the power of the sword in the future, he realized how precious it was. "Ming Xiu, you have to thank this classmate. She took a huge risk to inform you." Zhouwen hurriedly changed the topic, not wanting to harp on this matter. Ming Xiu looked at Belle in puzzlement, unsure what had happened. Zhouwen recounted what had happened. After Ming Xiu heard it, he expressed his gratitude to Belle. As for the hermit, Ming Xiu didn't do anything to him. Instead, after asking Zhouwen, he let him go. Zhouwen could roughly guess Ming Xiu's thoughts, so he didn't ask further. However, after seeing Ming Xiu, he missed those people even more. Looking at Tsukuyami, Zhouwen gritted his teeth and decided to return to Luoyang with her. Chapter 1152. In Luoyang's and family, a guard reported to Tianzhua in the study. "Overseer, Monsieur has been in the room for a day. Nanny Yu has been calling for a long time, but there's no response. Madam isn't home, so Nanny Yu is afraid that something will happen. She came to ask Overseer what to do." "Why isn't she eating again? Didn't I tell you that she likes sweets?" Tianzhua said as he stood up. "Nanny Yu said that the best desserts in Luoyang have been bought. Even the best dessert chef has been hired, but Monsieur isn't eating. She didn't eat anything last night, and she hasn't come out today," the guard said. "She hasn't eaten anything since last night. How can that be?" As Tianzhua spoke, he walked out of the study and quickly walked towards Ye'er's courtyard. Why didn't you eat today? Is the food at home not to your liking? Shall I take you out to eat? Entienzwa knocked on the door and said gently, I'm not hungry. I don't want to eat. The door creaked open, and a 7 or 8-year-old girl came out. She was as pretty as a doll, but her expression was a little too cold. It didn't look like an expression a little girl of her age should have. You have to eat some even if you don't want to. You are growing, so you have to eat more. If you are tired of Luoyang's desserts, I'll invite the famous dessert chefs in the south. They know how to make more desserts and they are more delicious, Entienzwa said with a smile. Yer shook her head. Uncle, I'm really not hungry. I don't want to eat. How can you not be hungry? Wait in the living room. I'll personally cook something delicious for you. It's my specialty. I guarantee you will like it, Entienzwa said as he headed for the kitchen. Yer sat on the sofa in the living room and held her chin in boredom. Although the family's life was very comfortable and everyone treated her well, she still liked the life she had when she went on adventures with Zhou. Suddenly, 2 figures appeared in the living room. They were Zhou and Tsukuyami. Zhou really couldn't shake Tsukuyami off, but seeing that she wasn't a dimensional creature that killed randomly, he hesitated before bringing her back to Luoyang. As he didn't know why the family had created a fake Zhou couldn't return through the main door. He decided he might as well teleport to the place where he and Ouyang Lan had eaten, hoping to see if he could bump into her. After teleporting, he didn't see Ouyang Lan. Instead, he saw Yer sitting on the sofa in a daze. Although Yer was much bigger than before, he could still vaguely tell her previous appearance. Furthermore, she had a unique aura that others couldn't sense. Zhou had been with Yer for too long, so he was very familiar with that unique aura. When Yer saw Zhou, she was first stunned before she was pleasantly surprised. She jumped up from the sofa and pounced into Zhou's arms. You said you would raise me? Yer said angrily before opening her mouth and biting Zhou's neck. Yang lan yamoyu hua hua gu and I lan a yang yangwen. I didn't want to either, but I was locked up by someone. I couldn't come back to find you, Zhou explained. Who is it? Yer bit her lip and asked. We'll talk about that in the future. Zhou stroked Yer's head. You've grown taller and grown up. You've become more beautiful and adorable. Yer squinted her eyes like a kitten and leaned her hair against Zhou's hand. She gently rubbed it as though she enjoyed his stroking. Yer, here you go. Entienzwa walked in with a bowl of steaming soup dumplings. He was wearing a white shirt, military pants, and an apron. His body was stained with a lot of flour, and even the tip of his nose had a pinch of flour. He looked completely different from his usual dignified appearance. However, when he saw Zhou carrying Yer, the gentleness on his face immediately disappeared. It was as though he had instantly returned to the cold and arrogant overseer. However, he was wearing an apron and holding a bowl. His face was stained with flour, and his aura was somewhat weaker than usual. He didn't look as arrogant as he usually did. Seeing Zhou turn his head, Entienzwa immediately pulled off his apron and threw it at the guard beside him. He placed the bowl of soup dumplings on the table beside him and wiped his face. His expression instantly turned arrogant and cold. When did you come back? Entienzwa asked Zhou coldly. Just now, Zhou answered. Entienzwa said coldly, since you're back, stay at home for the next few days. Don't go out and cause trouble. With that said, Entienzwa glanced at Yer, who was in Zhou's arms with a smile on her face. He turned around and left. When he reached the door, he paused and said, Yer hasn't eaten much for the past 2 days. The kitchen has prepared a bowl of soup dumplings for her. Give it to her. Aren't you afraid of leading the child astray after leaving her at home for so long? With that said, Entienzwa walked out of the living room without looking back. After leaving the living room, Entienzwa instructed the guard beside him, send a message to Ensheng and tell him that that person is back. Do you need a teleportation order? The guard asked. There's no need. He knows what to do. And Tianzua took a few steps and seemed to recall something. He said to the guard beside him, "Go to the kitchen and get a cup of freshly squeezed orange juice for your. Heat it to 43 degrees Celsius." "Yes, overseer." The guard accepted the order and left. Zhou sat on the sofa and watched Yer eat the soup dumplings. After 5 years, Yer's language skills had improved a lot. Although she still didn't like to speak, she would occasionally say something. It wasn't as concise and stiff as before. Zhou could also tell that Yer's personality had become more cheerful. Clearly, the Yin family had taken good care of Yer over the past 5 years. Perhaps it was because of Zhou return, Yer's appetite was very good. In a short while, she finished the bowl of soup dumplings and licked her lips as though she hadn't had enough. She felt that the soup dumplings today were especially delicious. With Zhou by her side, Yer didn't wish to speak. As long as she was by Zhou side, she would feel at ease. There was no need to say much. However, the way Yer looked at Tsukuyami seemed to be filled with hostility. "She's Tsukuyami, my friend. This is Yer. She's like my sister." Zhou hurriedly introduced the two of them to prevent anything from happening. "I'm not an ordinary friend. I'm Zhou wife." Tsukuyami deliberately emphasized her identity and said to Yer with a smile. "Divorce is very common now," Yer said expressionlessly. Chapter 1153. Their gazes met in the air, and it was as if sparks were flying between them. "Young Master One, you're back." And Xing came in at the right time, interrupting Tsukuyami and Yer's eye contact. "Ah, Xing." Zhou was overjoyed. On the one hand, he hadn't met Xing in a long time, and on the other hand, he was grateful that Xing had come in time. If they really fought, Zhou was afraid that all of Luoyang would be reduced to ruins. He pulled Xing to sit down and chat, but Zhou didn't ask about the fake Zhou. And Xing didn't say anything either. They only talked about family matters. When Zhou rested at night, there was a bookshelf in his room. Zhou pulled out a book from the bookshelf and read it. It recorded a lot of information that Zhou wanted to know. This was also what Xing had secretly told him. After reading for a while, Zhou roughly knew why a fake Zhou had appeared in the Yin family. After Zhou was trapped, Wang Mingyuan secretly came to the Yin family and told them that Zhou would be missing for 5 years. He wanted them to create a fake Zhou to replace Zhou's identity during these 5 years. They couldn't let outsiders discover any flaws. However, there was no record of who was impersonating Zhou. How did teacher know that I would escape in 5 years? Zhou was somewhat puzzled. This was because his awakening and escape seemed to be a coincidence, but the timing was consistent with Wang Mingyuan's deduction. This made Zhou suspect if his escape was a coincidence. However, Wang Mingyuan was now in a dimension, so it was useless to guess. The book also recorded something else that Zhou wanted to know. Over the past 5 years, Ouyang Lan had still been investigating the former principal's expedition team. Ouyang Lan had made some discoveries some time ago, so she had already rushed to Netherworld City. She wanted to find Chu He, who was trapped in Netherworld City. She wanted to confirm some guesses. If those guesses were true, the expedition team's disappearance was very likely related to the trajectory Holy Temple of the 6 Holy Temples. Zhou jumped in fright when he saw that Ouyang Lan had gone to Netherworld City. Ignoring the fact that dimensional creatures were everywhere outside, Netherworld City itself was a very terrifying place. It wasn't easy to come out alive after entering. I told you about the situation in Netherworld City. You should know how dangerous it is. Why didn't you stop Sislan? Zhou sent Xing a message. Soon Xing replied, "You know Madam's temper. Once she decides on something, even the overseer can't change it. However, you don't have to worry too much. The overseer has sent many experts from the Sunset Army to accompany them. If they were to explore Netherworld City, they wouldn't let Madam enter personally. Coupled with the information you provided, there shouldn't be too much danger. I'm just afraid that the current Yellow Spring City is different from the past. Zhou knew that Netherworld City wasn't simple. Only by enduring all the punishments could he see the true Netherworld City. What do you mean? Ansheng asked in puzzlement. Zhou told Ansheng what City Lord Netherworld had said back then. Ansheng heaved a sigh of relief when he heard that. Don't worry. None of them can withstand all the punishment. Nothing will happen. Ansheng then told Zhou about the current situation in the Federation. It was similar to what Zhou knew previously. Earth could be roughly divided into 5 factions: the Federation President and some of his supporters, the League of Defender, the Holy Spirit Society, the overseas factions, and local wealthy families like the Infamily. There were also some powerful freelance hunters. Some of them were also very powerful, but compared to these large factions, their individual strength was still relatively weak. The 6 hero families didn't decline, nor were they completely controlled by the League of Defender. Their branches extended to the various factions. Even if one side collapsed, the 6 heroes wouldn't be completely destroyed. In fact, there were many members of the 6 families in the League of Defender. Although the Zhang family nominally opposed the Zhang family's entry into the League of Defender, there were still some Zhang family members who entered the League of Defender. No one could be sure if those people had really been expelled from the Zhang family. This is the heritage of a large family clan. As long as their survival model isn't destroyed, as long as the supply chain of resources is continuous, it doesn't matter even if a few geniuses and experts die. They have the ability to create more geniuses and experts. All they need is time, Ashing said. Zhou knew that Ashing was right. The reason why the 6 families were strong wasn't because of a particular genius, but because they already had a complete family survival model. They could obtain endless resources and nurture all kinds of geniuses. To topple such a family, it was useless to kill a few geniuses and experts. Unless the entire family was doomed, they would be able to prosper again sooner or later. Just like the Cape family, many geniuses had died because of Zhou, but they were still standing tall. According to Ansheng, the Antelope and Chick were following the fake Zhou. Only by doing so could they deceive those who were paying attention to Zhou. Therefore, they weren't in the Infamily now. Instead, they were guarding Chess Mountain with the fake Zhou. After chatting with Ansheng, Zhou took out his mysterious phone and entered the game again. Snow Valley's Gu mother hadn't respawned, so Zhou didn't choose to head to the Sapphire Sky. Instead, he chose to head to the Endless Sea of Stars Instance Dungeon. He wanted to see if he could kill the planet Devourer. He also grinded the Sea of Constellations, but he still failed to obtain the final 28 Lunar Mansion skills. After leaving the Sea of Constellations, Zhou summoned Banana Fairy and Demonic Neonate. Not long after, he sensed spatial fluctuations. The gigantic planet Devourer appeared above their heads. The jellyfish-like planet Devourer emitted intense starlight, but most people couldn't see this starlight. In its body there was a vortex that resembled a black hole. Everything that approached it was sucked into the black hole. The moment the planet Devourer descended, the terrifying suction force descended as well. Banana Fairy directly used the Grand Een Wind on the planet Devourer. With the augmentation of the 3 realms Wheel of Destiny, this fan was extremely terrifying. However, when the Grand Een Wind blew in front of the planet Devourer, it was sucked in by the black hole in its body. Banana Fairy fanned the solar wind again, but the outcome was the same. They were all sucked in by the black hole. Banana Fairy frowned slightly as the fan formed from the banana leaf in her hand revealed a state of half yin and half yang. At the instant she fanned it at the planet Devourer, the yin and yang winds fused into one, transforming into an infinite wind that swept towards the approaching planet Devourer. Chapter 1154. The infinite wind blew endlessly at the planet Devourer, but it failed to send it flying. Its body was like a black hole. No matter what kind of force rushed at it, it would be devoured by the black hole. This had nothing to do with the strength. This was the characteristic of the planet devourer. Zhou felt a headache. A dimensional creature whose body was a black hole couldn't be injured by ordinary forces. No matter how strong the attack was, it was futile. It's no wonder it can devour planets. Zhou could only teleport with Banana Fairy to dodge the planet devourer's suction as he thought about how to kill it. The planet devourer was also good at spatial powers. It constantly teleported with Zhou in a bid to devour him. Thankfully, Zhou, who was wearing the clown mask, could teleport infinitely. The planet devourer couldn't catch up to him. With a thought, Zhou teleported to a small planet. After the planet devourer teleported over, it devoured the small planet before Zhou teleported to another small planet. Zhou thought that the planet devourer was a dimensional creature after all. It couldn't possibly devour infinite matter, right? If he could use these small planets to feed it, he might have a chance to finish it off. However, Zhou soon realized that his thoughts were ridiculously wrong. After the planet devourer devoured the small planet, not only did it not show any signs of being full, but the range and suction force of the black hole increased. Only then did Zhou realize that he had thought the opposite. The more matter the planet devourer devoured, the stronger it became. It didn't seem to be filled. Since I can't feed it, I'll starve it to death. With a thought, Zhou teleported to a place with fewer small planets. Teleportation expended a large amount of essence energy. With the massive size of the planet devourer, the energy expended by teleportation was even more terrifying. After several consecutive teleportations, Zhou could clearly sense that the planet devourer's black hole seemed to have weakened significantly. The suction range and strength were decreasing. It's indeed effective. Zhou was delighted as he continued wandering the endless sea of stars with the planet devourer. The planet devourer had expended a lot of energy. It suddenly stopped chasing Zhou and charged towards a nearby small planet. Clearly, it wanted to devour the small planet to replenish its energy. Zhou naturally couldn't let it have its way. He teleported to the tiny planet as the clown mask on his face emitted a strange aura. The surrounding space distorted. Zhou pressed his palm on the tiny planet, hoping to teleport it away. Unfortunately, he soon discovered that although the clown mask's spatial energy was powerful, it was still too difficult for it to teleport a small star far away. Before Zhou could successfully teleport the tiny planet, the planet devourer had already devoured it. All Zhou could do was teleport away. It doesn't seem realistic to forcefully teleport, but what if it's the teleportation ability of the sky-stealing sun-shifting art? Zhou didn't give up on his plan and thought of a way to complete it. Zhou circulated the sky-stealing sun-shifting art and engraved it on the Wheel of Destiny. It was a point, a singularity in the universe. The singularity was the beginning of the universe and also the eternity of the universe. It looked like a single point, but there seemed to be a small universe within it. There were countless stars orbiting within it. Back when Zhou condensed the singularity life soul, he had already begun advancing to the mythical stage. He didn't have much time to study the abilities of this life soul. Later, he was trapped for 5 years, but his thoughts had passed for more than 100 years. During this long period of time, Zhou had a deep understanding of the sky-stealing sun-shifting art and the singularity. However, research was ultimately research. As he was trapped, he could only think about it and couldn't verify it. Therefore, Zhou didn't know if he was right or not. Now that he was in the endless sea of stars, he could test Zhou's ideas. With the power of the singularity universe, Zhou could freely shuttle between the small planets in the endless sea of stars. However, he could only lock onto the small planets and couldn't teleport as freely as the clown mask. However, the teleportation distance was much further than the clown mask. Zhou landed on a small planet and attempted to use the power of the singularity universe to teleport the small planet to another location. However, he didn't teleport. Although the star corresponding to the small planet in the singularity universe kept flickering, there was no movement. The planet devourer had already caught up. Zhou could only give up on the idea of teleporting this small planet and teleport to another small planet. However, Zhou didn't give up. He continued trying again and again. He felt that he should succeed. Since this essence energy art is called sky-stealing sun-shifting art, it doesn't make sense that I can't even exchange a small planet. Sun-shifting. Zhou suddenly thought of something as his eyes lit up. He tried again, but this time, he didn't just want to teleport the small planet over. Instead, he wanted to swap it with another small planet. In the singularity universe, 2 stars lit up. As Zhou hands pressed down on the small planet, they produced spatial fluctuations. The entire small planet seemed to be affected by the spatial fluctuations. Boom! The singularity universe exploded with powerful spatial energy fluctuations. It was like the Big Bang of the universe. Instantly, it produced a strange pocket universe phantom that fused with Zhou body. It made Zhou feel like the universe was him, and he was the universe. In the next second, something unbelievable happened. The spatial energy suddenly erupted. Then, the metal planet in Zhou hand instantly turned into a rocky planet. It was the one Zhou had chosen to exchange with. Damn, it's actually possible. Then, can I exchange Earth with other planets in the real world? Can I let Earth leave the Milky Way? Zhou imagined himself traveling through the universe with Earth. However, on careful thought, it probably wasn't that easy. After the singularity universe advanced to the terregrade, it could only move such a mini-planet. The size of a small planet was about the same as a mountain. It was far inferior to Earth. It probably wasn't that easy to exchange for a real planet. Furthermore, there were so many terrifying creatures and dimensional zones on Earth. It was impossible for him to not expend energy to teleport with so many terrifying things. Zhou looked at the blood-colored avatar's information and realized that the terror form condensed by the sky-stealing sun-shifting art was called Singularity Universe. It was also an S-grade terror form. Up to now, Zhou had condensed 4 S-grade terror forms: Brahma, Godfiend Era, Heaven-opening Scripture of the Highest Elder, and Singularity Universe. However, his level was still at the mythical stage, and his stats hadn't exceeded 81. Chapter 1155. The Singularity Universe's terror transformation allowed Zhou to obtain some means of skyswapping, but this method had to be exchanged. He couldn't teleport the tiny planet away out of thin air. After sending one away and exchanging for another, after being devoured by the planet devourer, it would still replenish its mass, allowing the planet devourer to be replenished. This was clearly far from what Zhou wanted. Is there no other way? Zhou constantly comprehended the power the Singularity Universe gave him. Zhou realized that sky-swapping didn't necessarily require exchanging planet. He could completely exchange a planet with a paper ball. This was also possible. However, with the Singularity Universe's present strength, it was impossible to achieve that level. This was because the positioning was too vague. The smallest unit that the Singularity Universe could locate was a planet. Without being able to locate a long-distance paper ball, there was naturally no way to exchange. I'm already at the terror grade. Shouldn't I raise the resolution? Even if I can't see the paper ball, I can still locate a mountain or river. Zhou felt somewhat depressed. However, on second thought, Zhou heart stirred again. The Singularity Universe alone definitely couldn't achieve such a detailed level. After all, the sky-stealing sun-swapping art was a rather macroscopic essence energy art. However, the power of the Godfiend Era was different. It was also a spatial power, but the Godfiend Era was a more precise spatial power. If I can use the power of the clown mask and the singularity universe at the same time like Brahma and the clown mask, what kind of effect will it produce? Will I be able to do some more precise positioning and exchange? With a thought, Zhou circulated the two terror transformation powers at the same time. Since he wasn't afraid of death in-game, it didn't matter if he tried. Bam! When Zhou attempted to fuse the two terror powers, the blood-colored avatar's body split apart and vanished. The game screen went black and a notification popped up. Suicide successful. A dark cloud hung over Zhou head as he thought to himself, how can this be considered suicide? I'm clearly sacrificing myself for an experiment. Although his attempt didn't succeed, Zhou knew very well that this was because he hadn't grasped the rhythm of the fusion of the two terror powers. It didn't mean that they couldn't fuse. Therefore, Zhou began making repeated attempts, but the result was a successful suicide. Every death had a certain harvest. Zhou knew that he wasn't far from success. If all 9 essence energy arts complete their terror transformation and use 9 terror transformation powers at the same time, what kind of scene would that be? Zhou had a vague sense of anticipation. After training hard for most of the night, Zhou finally succeeded in fusing the two terror powers into one for the first time. Then, he attempted to teleport a tiny planet out. However, when he pressed his palm on the small planet, a black hole appeared and swallowed the small planet. The black hole also began devouring everything around it, nearly sucking the blood-colored avatar in. Thankfully, Zhou reacted quickly and teleported out. This was completely different from what Zhou had expected. Clearly, the spatial powers after the fusion didn't develop in the direction he wanted. Instead, they created a black hole. Using a black hole against a black hole, I wonder if it can deal with the planet devourer? As Zhou was thinking, he realized that the planet devourer had already descended on the small black hole he had created. The planet devourer charged at the small black hole. When the two collided, not only did they not clash, but they fused together, making the planet devourer even stronger. That black hole has betrayed me! Zhou nearly spat out a mouthful of blood. He knew that his control over the fusion-type terror powers wasn't good. Furthermore, using a black hole to fight a black hole wasn't right. With no other choice, Zhou could only continue experimenting. Thankfully, with his successful experience, everything went much smoother. Zhou quickly grasped the method to create a black hole. However, the black holes he could create were only small black holes. Furthermore, he needed enough external material to support them. Although this move was useless against the planet devourer, it was still very effective against other terror creatures. Zhou continued studying. His main goal was to truly switch sides and teleport the planet away without giving the planet devourer a chance to replenish itself. Zhou failed to complete his goal until morning, but he had some ideas. And Xing sent a message early in the morning, telling Zhou to stay in the family for the time being and not go anywhere. He could exchange identities with the fake Zhou tonight. Who is that Zhou? Zhou replied. Guess, and Xing replied. I can't guess. Zhou thought to himself, guess my ass. How would I know who it is? However, on second thought, it wasn't easy to pretend to be him without revealing any flaws. His iconic companion beasts were almost unique, and they had to be strong enough. Even with the chick and antelope as cover, it wasn't easy to find such a person. It can't be you, right? Zhou said after some thought. No, if it's me, it'll be too obvious. He'll definitely be seen through. And Xing denied Zhou's guess. Then who is it? Zhou really couldn't guess. There were only a few experts in Luoyang. It was impossible for Leng Zongjing and Tianzhua to impersonate him. Zhou really couldn't guess who else had such an ability. You'll know when the time comes. And Xing clearly liked this feeling very much and didn't tell Zhou directly. Since Xing didn't say anything, Zhou had no choice but to stop asking. After chatting with Xing for a while, and Sheng went to busy himself. Yer pushed open the door and walked in. She was holding a plate in her hand. There was breakfast on the plate, and it looked like it was double servings. Yer placed the plate on the table and sat down opposite Zhouwen. She blinked and said, "Let's have breakfast together." Zhouwen hadn't slept to begin with. He sat down and prepared to have breakfast with Yer, but to his surprise, before he could sit down, Tsukuyomi walked in and sat down in Zhouwen's seat. She picked up Zhouwen's breakfast and took a bite. She looked at Yer and said with a smile, "Not bad. It's delicious. Thank you." "There's no need to thank me. Anyway, I feed the dogs at home every day. I'm used to it." Yer pushed the remaining portion of the plate in front of Tsukuyomi. "Eat more if you like it." Zhouwen didn't know why Tsukuyomi liked to target Yer so much, but seeing that they were about to fight again, he hurriedly pulled Yer away. He coughed lightly and said to Tsukuyomi, "Don't you want to see how humans study? Why don't I take you to where I used to go to school? Isn't it just a place like Royal College?" "It's boring," Tsukuyomi said. "It's different. The place where I went to school is quite interesting, but I can only go there later." Zhouwen wanted to meet his old classmates, but on careful thought, they had long graduated. Unless they stayed in school to continue their studies or become tutors, it was impossible for him to meet them again. "I wonder how Gu Dian is now?" Zhouwen thought of the man who resembled a devil. He had already learned about Li Xian and company from Ensheng. Only Gu Dian had disappeared after graduation, and he had no idea where he had gone. Chapter 1156. At night, Ensheng came over to call Zhouwen and Yer to the front hall for dinner. Tsukuyomi kept following Zhouwen, so Zhouwen had no choice but to bring her along. Before the group reached the front hall, they saw a golden stream of light fly out of the hall and instantly arrive in front of Zhouwen. Zhouwen extended his arm and saw a strange golden-feathered bird land on his arm. It was a chick. However, the chick's current size was like an eagle. It puzzled Zhouwen as he thought to himself, "How strange. Isn't it a descendant of a phoenix? Why does it look more and more like an eagle?" However, Zhouwen was still delighted to be able to reunite with the chick. He reached out to stroke the chick's feathers and vaguely felt a scorching heat flowing under the feathers. The chick intimately rubbed its head against Zhouwen's body, not feeling any sense of unfamiliarity from 5 years of separation. Up to now, Zhouwen still didn't understand why the phoenix had chosen him to deal with the chick. After entering the front hall, Zhouwen saw the antelope lazily sprawled on the sofa without approaching the dining table. At the dining table, Tianzhua was sitting in the seat of honor, and Enjing was sitting to his right. After so many years, Enjing's appearance was very different from before. She was tall and not shorter than Zhouwen. Her face no longer had baby fat, making her look more heroic. Furthermore, she looked a lot calmer. Even though she was sitting there, her back was straight. One could see the bearing of a soldier from her. Tianzhua and Enjing looked at Zhouwen without a word. "Young Master Wen, sit here." Ensheng got Zhouwen to sit on Tianzhua's left while Yer sat beside him. Ensheng originally wanted to arrange for Tsukuyomi to sit beside Enjing, but Tsukuyomi sat beside Yer. Ensheng had no choice but to walk to Enjing's side and sit down. Then, he said to Zhouwen, "Young Master Wen, why don't you introduce this beautiful lady to us? Her name is Tsukuyomi. She's a friend I met overseas." Zhouwen found it odd. This was because Ensheng had previously said that he should be able to see the person pretending to be him at night, but there was only Tianzhua and Enjing here. It's definitely impossible for Tianzhua. Could it be that the person pretending to be me is Enjing? Zhouwen couldn't help but glance at Enjing. Enjing happened to be looking at him as well. When their eyes met, the two of them subconsciously looked away, feeling a little uncomfortable. "Miss Yu is from overseas? Which island do you live on?" Tianzhua asked Tsukuyomi. "Bride Island," Tsukuyomi answered truthfully. "Bride Island?" Tianzhua frowned slightly as he sized up Tsukuyomi. Obviously, He knew what kind of place Bride Island was and knew that it was impossible for humans to live there. Zhouwen was afraid that Tianzhua would continue asking, so he explained, Bride Island isn't as terrifying as the legends say. I've been to Bride Island before and saw the ghost parade. Zhou Wen's topic immediately piqued Sheng's interest. I heard that there was a ghost parade disaster overseas. There should be a calamity creature appearing, but for some reason, there was suddenly no news of it. Young Master One, since you've been there, do you know what happened? Jing and Tianzhua also looked at Zhouwen. Clearly, they wanted to know the answer. Zhouwen naturally knew what was going on, but he couldn't tell them in front of Tsukuyomi that he, Zhouwen, was the one who had abducted a calamity creature that had just been born. That was why the dimensional creatures that accompanied it were temporarily obedient, right? Actually, it's all misinformation. Calamity creatures aren't as terrifying as the outside world describes them to be. They are still very kind, reasonable, and amiable. I reasoned with them, and they probably felt that what I said made sense, so they didn't continue the ghost parade. With Tsukuyomi beside him, he could only speak against his will. Otherwise, if he angered Tsukuyomi, Luoyang would probably be doomed. Tianzhua, Jing, and Sheng looked at him. Their gazes explained everything. They felt that Zhouwen was spouting nonsense. Reasoned with calamity creatures? Furthermore, they were kind and amiable. It would be a miracle if they believed him. Jing said indifferently, they are so kind and nice. Why didn't you invite them back as guests? Why didn't I invite them? Isn't it just beside us? Zhouwen thought to himself, but he said, it's too far away. It's not easy to travel. I'll invite them over next time if there's a chance. Jing curled her lips and didn't say anything else. Clearly, she felt that Zhouwen was spouting nonsense. Sheng hurriedly tried to smooth things over. Overseer, the food is ready. Why don't we serve it first? Tianzhua nodded slightly as Sheng hurriedly ordered someone to serve the food. The food was very sumptuous, but it wasn't extravagant. The most expensive food was probably the dessert that Yer ate. The rest were ordinary home-cooked dishes, but they were rather exquisite. The atmosphere was especially stiff when the few of them ate together. Tianzhua took a few bites and put down his bowl and chopsticks before asking Tsukuyomi, Miss Tsukuyomi, you live on Bride Island. Have you seen the ghost parade with your own eyes? Of course I've seen it, Tsukuyomi answered. I wonder which 100 ghosts the ghost parade are. Let us broaden our horizons, Tianzhua said. It's said to be 100 ghosts, but there are actually more than 100. If it's the Terragrade, there are more than 100. For example, Daitengu, Yukiana, Hashiheim, and company are all at the Terragrade, Tsukuyomi answered. You're really lucky to be able to escape alive with so many terror creatures. Jing clearly didn't believe Tsukuyomi's words. Didn't Zhouwen already say that the dimensional creatures there are very kind and amiable? We get along very well and are like friends. There's no need to escape, right? Tsukuyomi's last sentence was directed at Zhouwen. Yes, they're especially amiable. They're really kind. They're all friends. What else could Zhouwen say? He could only go along with Tsukuyomi. Then you really should invite them back next time. Let us meet those amiable friends, Jing said casually. There's no need to wait for the next time. I can introduce you now, Tsukuyomi said. Jing felt that there was no point in continuing. Just as she was about to end the topic, the lights in the hall suddenly went out. It wasn't just the living room. The entire family had fallen into darkness. All the lights were extinguished. Jing and Sheng's expressions changed. They wanted to get up, but Tianzhua calmly said, sit down. Jing and Sheng had no choice but to sit down again. However, just as they sat down, a cold wind blew open the living room's door. Snowflakes blew in with the cold wind. At the same time, a woman in white floated in. Yukiana? Sheng and Jing stared at Yukiana. They had already guessed her identity, but they still found it unbelievable. Yuki Onna walked to Tsukuyumi's side and bowed slightly at them. "Greetings, Lord Infuma." Chapter 1157. Anjing and the others watched with their mouths agape. The entire An family was silent. With the An family's defenses, the army and hidden forces should have long rushed into the hall after such a huge commotion, but there was no movement at all. The dark yard was deathly silent. The night was terrifyingly dark, as though a dark behemoth was entrenched in a manor. The sound of wings flapping sounded. Almost at the same time, the Daitengu landed in front of the living room. It retracted its wings and bowed at Tsukuyumi and Jowon. "Greetings, Lord Infuma." Anjing and the others had naturally heard of the Daitengu's name. Legend had it that it was transformed from an emperor after his death. It had a very high status in a particular country's pantheon. Is this really the legendary Daitengu? Anjing's body trembled as she looked at the Daitengu that resembled a winged devil. It seemed very similar to the legends. Even if it wasn't the legendary Daitengu, just its ability to appear out of thin air was an extremely powerful existence. It was undoubtedly at the terror grade. Boom. Boom. Before Anjing could figure out if it was the real Daitengu, she suddenly heard a strange sound. It was as though a behemoth had stepped into a manor. Soon, a strange temple appeared in front of the living room. The strange temple seemed to have a life of its own. The open temple door was pitch black like the mouth of a terrifying monster. "Greetings, Lord Infuma." The temple landed in front of the hall with a rumble as a ghastly voice sounded. A faint zither sound came from the side door. Amaterasu carried his pipa and walked in. After entering the hall, he bowed at Tsukuyumi and Jowon. "Greetings, Lord Infuma." Moments later, 4 terrifying dimensional creatures appeared. Furthermore, there were many ghostly shadows in the distance as though endless ghosts were heading over. And Sheng and Anjing's strength was already extraordinary. They could sense that the strength of those creatures was extremely terrifying. They were definitely not ordinary mythical creatures. And Tianzhua didn't look at Yuki Onna and company. All he did was stare coldly at Tsukuyumi. He had already guessed Tsukuyumi's identity the moment Snow White appeared. Without a doubt, Tsukuyumi wasn't a real human, but a calamity creature that had appeared overseas. Only she could control so many terrifying creatures. And Sheng and Ansheng naturally thought of it as well. They looked at Tsukuyumi in horror. No one expected the woman who had returned with Zhou to be a calamity creature that had appeared overseas. Don't tell me she wants to trigger a ghost parade in the An family? Anjing felt extremely uneasy. If it was really as Tsukuyumi had said, with more than 100 terror creatures gathered here, the entire Luoyang city would probably suffer if there was a riot. "Tsukuyumi, that's enough. We are eating." "They can go back," Zhou said with a frown. When Tsukuyumi heard Zhou words, she was surprisingly gentle. She had no intention of retorting Zhou. She obediently raised her hand and waved it. Snow Onna, Daitengu, and the other terror creatures instantly retreated and hid into the darkness. As for the An family, it returned to normal. The lights were switched on again. The guards outside didn't seem to know what had happened. They were still patrolling, as if they didn't know what had just happened. And Tianzhua's brows relaxed when he saw that everyone in the residence was fine. "Sit down and eat." Zhou secretly heaved a sigh of relief when he saw Tsukuyumi put away the dimensional creatures. If they really fought, the An family and Luoyang would suffer heavy losses even if he could use the immortal culling sword to kill Tsukuyumi. Tsukuyumi seemed to have changed into a different person today. She was especially gentle and obedient as she picked up the bowl and chewed slowly. However, her current appearance was completely different from before in the eyes of Anjing and company. A calamity creature treated Zhou's words like an imperial edict. This was just too shocking. Only everyone knew what the meal tasted like. "I'm full. I want to go back and rest." Tsukuyumi looked at Zhou as though she was seeking his opinion. "Go back first." After Zhou said that, Tsukuyomi stood up and left. The moment Tsukuyomi left, the atmosphere immediately eased up. And Xing whispered, "Young Master One, is she really the one who appeared overseas?" Zhou nodded and said helplessly, "Yes. Young Master One, not bad. A calamity-grade creature is actually so obedient to you. Could it be that you have already advanced to the calamity stage?" And Xing asked. Although Xing and Tianzhua knew that Zhou Wen was human sovereign, they could also tell that Zhou Wen had relied on the power of that sword to defeat Di Tian the last time, not because he had advanced to the calamity grade. And Jing and Tianzhua also looked at Zhou Wen. They clearly wanted to know what level Zhou Wen had reached to make a calamity grade creature obey him. Tsukuyomi's performance just now didn't seem to go against Zhou Wen's wishes at all. Zhou Wen shook his head and said with a bitter smile, "I'm still at the mythical stage. I'm still very far from the calamity grade. As for Tsukuyomi, I can't explain it immediately. In short, it's a long story." And Xing naturally didn't believe him as he said with a smile, "To make a calamity grade creature obey you is a long story. I want to give it a try." Zhou Wen couldn't explain it clearly. No one would believe that a calamity creature insisted on marrying him. After the meal, Zhou Wen returned with Yer. The chick and antelope followed as well, seemingly without much reluctance. "Overseer, it looks like we don't have to worry about young Master Wen's safety. Even a calamity-grade creature is so obedient to him. Even if young Master Wen doesn't really advance to the calamity grade, he's definitely much stronger than before. It probably won't be that easy for the League of Defender to touch him," and Xing said. "Have we been worried about his safety?" And Tianzhua said indifferently, "Furthermore, just as he said, his strength hasn't reached the calamity grade. He hasn't even reached the terror grade. There must be another reason why Tsukuyomi is following him. It might not be a good thing. Tsukuyomi doesn't seem to have any ill intentions towards young Master One," and Xing said. "Not having any ill intentions doesn't mean anything. You still have to continue with the previous arrangements. Don't have any wishful thinking," and Tianzhua said. And Xing stood up and bowed as he said seriously, "Overseer, don't worry. I'll do my best to do everything." And Jing sat by the side and ate silently without saying a word. She originally thought that she had grown a lot in the past 5 years, but now she suddenly realized that her growth was nothing in front of Zhou Wen. Zhou Wen returned to his room and realized that Tsukuyomi was sitting there waiting for him. Upon seeing Zhou Wen return, Tsukuyomi blinked and asked, "How did I do?" "What do you mean?" Zhou Wen asked in puzzlement. "Of course it's your performance at the banquet. Don't you humans say that a good wife has to give her husband face in front of outsiders? Does what I did count as giving you face? Does that count as a good wife?" Tsukuyomi asked Zhou Wen. "You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.